Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into Sunday Morning Murder Church, episode 45 of the Phil Spector murder trial. I can't believe it. I keep saying this, but it's still hovering around halfway at this point. We're going to continue with Dr. Lynn Harold's testimony. We're on part 9 of that, and we'll see if we can get through her this morning. We're going to see we got a full episode in store for Murder Church. Thank you for coming through. Hit the like, give it a share, and let's rock and roll. Thanks a lot.
Let's rock.
Good morning, everybody. Let me wake Botrix up. She's like, I ain't getting out of bed. I ain't getting out of bed this morning. Well, you're going to have to. Booted her right now. What's up, everybody? Welcome in here, Murder Church. On a Sunday morning, I'm going to start this son of a bitch right out the gate with some bells. I ain't forgetting about it today. I ain't forgetting about it. One thing, we had a blast on Feral Friday. Anybody in the Buzz Nation that did not come through on Kick, holy crap, we started a new show called Prisoner that is really fun to watch, and especially with a group. Holy crap, we went through 3 episodes of this show from 1979. It's from Australia. Way ahead of its time. Nothing like this was on American television at the time. Very good. Yeah, hopefully, and we're going to keep playing some of that. I was thinking, Dan missed Friday night. He's going to be, when we get into episode 4, he's going to be very confused. So we have to going to have to get him refreshed on whole vinegar tits and all the lingo and all the characters that are on that show. But welcome in here, everybody. Good morning. Glad everybody could be here this morning. Hopefully Botrix decides to wake up. I like to see the old chat on the screen, so I don't have to pull it up over here. But one thing I need to do is get it in here so I can talk to you guys. So let me see here. Who's in here this morning? Pokemom's in here. Shelly's in here. I love to see that sticker on the back of the car. She was rocking one of these badass Murder Church stickers, which is in the merch tour. PubliclyBuzzed at PubliclyBuzzed.com, actually. Have her own website with tons of merch and stickers on it. Gave away some of these guys on Friday night from a wheel. So we have a new wheel rocking, and I think Nay started that bad boy out. And this time we are doing a t-shirt. So anybody that's been looking for a t-shirt to get on this wheel, today is your day. Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, supers in the chat, membering up or be gifting out memberships is how you do just that. Wildside's in here. Welcome. Gabby's in here. BGOG's in here. Stacy's in here. Where's the pickles? Passed the F out on Friday night. I get it. We went deep. We stayed up to about midnight watching that show. It was fun. Jersey Jen's in the house. Good morning. Hope you had a good weekend, Jen. Sheila Duffy's in here. Sheila, I've got your shirts on the way here. I'm still waiting for them to arrive. As soon as they do, they'll be on the way to Ireland. Still dropping merch around the world out here in the Buzz Nation. Dizzy's in the house this morning. Hope you had a great weekend as well, Dizzy. Thank you for coming in here and modding this morning. Looking through here. Wildside, Drew Gambino, everybody's in here. Buzz Nation representing. That's what I like to see. Love it. Kelly Bobelli's hiding around back there. Hell yeah. Thank y'all very much. Sinead's in here as well. All the way, again, from Ireland, doing it. CH was hanging out on Friday. Friday was awesome, guys. I'm going to be getting every one of those episodes off Kick and putting them on Patreon, but they're still up there right now. You can still see those currently, so they'll be there for just a little bit longer. I appreciate everyone for hanging out. Again, we are still on this trial. We're going to be on this classic trial for quite some time as we plow our way through this Phil Spector first trial from 2007. We're starting out again with Dr. Lynn Harold, and I'm not sure if this is the last part of her. I'm not sure. I think we're about to get Cross, potentially. She's been up here with with Linda Kenny Bodden for freaking literally weeks here on Murder Church. So there she woke up. There she is. Look at this. Woo! I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put that behind me so it can be like that right there. There we go. Open it up a little bit. Make it just a little bigger. Let's see. I like to play with stuff on it. There we go. A little bigger, but not too big. Yeah. All right, guys, we're about to rock in here. Appreciate everyone for coming in. Got the bells rocking, and let's do the damn thing, shan't we? Open this up, make sure we got some sound. We're going to be hanging till probably about noon, 12:30, the usual murder church time frame. I do got a lot of cool things planned. I'm talking to this one lady, potentially for an interview for a special live, Saturday night live, if you will, next week. I just need to get everything ironed out, but it's going to be an interesting little show. I'll just put it that way. It's going to be in reference to Sarah Boone. And yeah, I've got a professional that might be coming on here and giving us a little bit of insight on a few different things in her world coming up. So, yes, indeed. Let's keep going, guys. Let's go. Start her out. Did I? Yeah, I did. Let's go. 53 minutes with Dr. Lynn Errol to start us out.
Parties, jurors, and alternates are present as heretofore, along with the
I'll be
witness.
checking the old Gmail for any donations.
You also examined, as you told us on your direct examination, the diaper that was found in the lower bathroom outside the
Thanks
stairwell.
for that share, Sheila.
Spector's house.
Yes.
Okay. And when you examined that diaper, you reported in your notes that there was no obvious smokeless powder on the diaper. Isn't that correct?
Probably, yes.
Okay. And
Give a couple of shout outs. Phil, the man, we gave out a hoopty on Friday night on the YouTube part of Feral Friday. Thanks to Phil Foss, Tayo Toys, the freaking man. Loved it. He's awesome, man. He's one of the coolest dudes out here. Jay, thanks for that share. Appreciate it, brother. Hell yeah. And Lexi, the law nerd. Thank you so much for that share. Appreciate it.
when you were answering the questions of Mr. Jackson on direct, you indicated that somebody had manipulated the face of Lana Clarkson. You remember that?
Yes.
And you implied, did you not, that it was with the diaper, did you not?
No.
I get some cross
two
here. Maybe that's on the
different
next
things.
video.
I said that her head must have been moved
Lord.
from the right to the left.
Winter is coming.
And that there is clotted blood
Winter
on
is
her
coming.
face. And that there is blood smeared. And that there is clotted blood on the diaper. Which was probably used to wipe the face because of the clot transfer.
Well, that's what I asked you, that you indicated that
we're back
the
to
diaper had been
little
utilized to
spiciness
wipe the
between these
face
two.
of
You
Ms.
can tell
Clarkson.
Well, you
love in
said
the
to
room.
manipulate her face, and by using the term manipulate, I took that to mean movement
Okay.
as differently than wiping.
Now, by looking at the diaper and her face, can you tell whether somebody used the diaper to wipe away evidence or to help the person?
Objection, that's argument beyond the scope of this witness's expertise, to wipe away evidence or to help a person?
I believe the question is truly an argumentative question, and therefore the objection is sustained.
Did you in your notes draw any inference or make any report as to why a diaper was used?
In my notes, I don't recall
Stacy,
if I
thank you for
did
that
or
share.
not.
Okay. Did you put anything in your
Thanks,
final
guys.
reports that indicated why a diaper was used?
No. Do you mean why a diaper was used, specifically a diaper as opposed to any piece of cloth? I'm not understanding what
rephrase
you're
it.
asking me.
Did you put in your notes, did you draw any conclusions, because you had blood on the diaper, as to the motivation of somebody using a diaper?
Objection, that would be beyond her expertise.
Sustained.
Now, you did look at all this evidence for a period of, what, about a year or more?
Or more. Yes, it's over a long period of time.
And you had about 400 and something pages.
Oh, God, we've been talking about a diaper for a couple of weeks now.
446.
446 pages.
Yes.
And you did a number of reports in this case, correct?
Yes.
In any of your final reports that were peer-reviewed, as you told us, did you conclude with any scientific certainty that Philip Spector pulled the trigger of that Colt Cobra on February 3rd, 2003?
No.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Thank you. Redirect.
Nothing further from Linda Kitty Bodden, dear God in heaven. Alan Jackson steps up to the plate. Ladies and gentlemen, ring the bell.
How you doing, Dr. Howard?
I'm fine. How are
Be right
you?
back, guys. I gotta get something. I will return.
I would say let's start at the beginning, but I might get a
Not a
jury
freaking coffee,
revolt.
idiot.
So I will not do that. I heard moaning coming from both the audience and the jury. All right, there are just a few points.
Gabby, I
I'll
think
leave
old
aside,
Phil's
Dr. Harold,
cleaning
that I
up
wanna bring
blood
up
with the
and,
diaper.
Visit with you about for just a second. Some points that Ms. Bodden made or attempted to make on her cross-examination. And the first thing that I want to bring up is to kind of bring us back home about blood spatter in general. Do the laws of physics change, Dr. Harold, when blood spatter is the product of an intraoral gunshot wound versus a wound to the arm? Do the laws of physics change?
No.
Do the laws of physics change whether a .22 caliber rifle is used or whether a bazooka is used?
No.
Do the laws of physics change whether you're seated or standing?
No.
Are particulate blood drops and their flight through the air, the laws of physics that act on particulate blood drops and their flight through the air dictated by a set and standard rule of law? Rule of law, law of physics.
Yes.
So if you have sub-millimeter sized particles, no matter what their initial velocity might have been, are those sub-millimeter or mist-like particles going to travel through the air at a given distance and basically, because of the air resistance and the effects of gravity, travel no further?
Yes.
All right. And if I understood your direct testimony and your cross-examination testimony, in your expert opinion, the mist-like spatter that appeared on Mr. Spector's jacket, and some of it appeared on Ms. Clarkson's slip dress as well, correct?
Yes.
The mist-like spatter that appeared on Mr. Spector's jacket traveled at most approximately 2 to 3 feet, correct?
Yes.
All right. And you said that in some circumstances, in laboratory experiments and laboratory environments, theoretically, that mist-like spatter can travel up to 4 feet as well, correct?
Yes.
Just because something can travel 2 to 3 feet, or even 4 feet theoretically, does that mean it did travel 2 to 3 feet or 4 feet?
No. It's all laboratory study, empirical observation overlaid with the specific circumstances from any particular case.
And I asked you the difference between intraoral blood spatter, let's say, and say a head wound blood spatter and an abdomen wound blood spatter. What is the device, or what is the thing, if you will, that's going to dictate how far that spatter can travel?
All right, I'm back.
It is the laws of physics that tell you the size of the particle, the mass of the particle, along with some environmental conditions and gravity that will dictate how far spatter can go. And in general, the larger the particle,
They gotta stand in for Phil.
the bigger the mass, the farther it can go.
So it's the size and the mass of the particle. Plain and simple, when we boil it all down, it's the size and the mass of the particle.
Yes, with all other things being equal.
As a matter of fact, Ms. Bodden asked you about Pex and Vaughn, the forensic criminalists Pex and Vaughn who have published in this area. And
Pex.
specifically, they indicated in a study that they did that the use of a .38 caliber weapon or ammunition and the use of .22 caliber ammunition had absolutely no relevance and showed no difference in how far spatter can travel, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And you've read other literature in this area as well, is that right?
Yes.
I don't want to bog you down with everything that's been written because it's been written on quite a bit, correct?
Yes.
I mean, there are a lot of publications out there about blood spatter and the physical effects of blood spatter, et cetera, correct?
Yes.
And
More
is-
than I can remember.
You're aware of a book called Forensic Science and Introduction to Criminalistics by Lee, DeForest, and Ganslin, correct?
Yes.
In that book, at page 307, there's a quote, "The blood droplets produced by shooting wounds have a range of droplet sizes, regardless of the direction in which they are projected." And that means regardless of whether or not it's forward spatter or back spatter moving backward, correct?
Yes.
These fine mist-like droplet patterns are characteristic of highly energetic interactions between objects and liquid blood, such as in shootings, correct?
Yes.
And Leaf, DeForest, and Ganslen go on, and by the way, Ganslen is spelled Gaenslen, 2 S's. Lee, DeForest, and Ganslen go on to say that very fine droplets do not travel very far in air, rarely more than a yard, even if they had high initial velocities, correct?
Correct.
It's dictated by the size, correct?
The size along with amount of drying, gravity effects, and air resistance.
Your hair's insane.
Ms. Bodden asked you whether you were aware of several different publications concerning, I think some of them were
that's a
foreign
page.
publications,
Morning,
some
morning.
German studies. As a matter of fact, she quoted a German study this morning and asked you if you were aware of one set of scientists who had seen a backspatter travel up to, I think she said 5 feet or maybe 6 feet. They did it in meters, 2 meters or something like that, correct?
Yes.
The mistakes.
I'm sorry, I'd have to hear who you were relating to.
I'm sorry, I wasn't actually listening.
Correct.
Thinking about dinner.
Somewhere 3 meters was mentioned.
Right, and I think that was a mistake. 3 meters is actually closer to 9 feet, correct, Dr. Harold?
Yes.
Yeah, and in actuality, over the break,
Yeah, I'm an American.
I
Let's not
downloaded
get into these
that
meters and
particular
shit.
study. Is that right, that paper?
Yes.
And I let you read it, right?
Yes.
It was actually 2 meters that they talked about, which is closer to 6 feet. Is that right?
Yes.
And in terms, in their terms, in these scientists' terms, they simply said backspatter, the word backspatter, and did not define it by size, correct?
It was a comment that was made in the discussion part of the paper relative to a case example and was not part of the actual study that they had done in which they were shooting animals.
As a matter of fact, they were shooting calves in the head, correct?
Yes.
All right, in most of that study.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, there were 9 gunshots in total for that whole study, correct?
Yes.
Not a real representative number of shots to be fired for a scientific study. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, you have to start somewhere, but the authors actually cautioned the interpretation or application of statistics because it is in fact only 9
right,
at
so-
this point.
and
So
I'm-
they're starting basic study.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
That's okay, that's okay. I want to make sure that we're clear and
God,
nobody's being
God in
misled.
heaven.
Dr. Harold, you agree with the scientific precept that larger
Well, I'm
than
shot
this
of
light
Phil.
spatter,
It's never been more
larger
accurate than what we just saw.
can, in
My
fact, travel
God.
several feet, maybe even a couple of meters, correct?
Yes.
Take no issue with that, right?
That was the same.
Now coming back
Tell
to
me
the
I'm wrong.
fine mist-like
I
spatter.
mean, that's not the goal.
That's the spatter that only travels 2 to 3 feet,
You're
and in
lying to
some
yourself.
theoretical sense may travel as much as 4 feet, correct?
Correct.
All right. As a matter of fact, Dr. Spitz. Didn't know he was going to get called on in this class. Dr. Spitz has joined us. He's a member of the defense team that you're aware of, correct?
Yes.
The man in the blue jacket and the red striped tie
Yes.
has published, at least in his book, he's edited a book that includes chapters on some blood stain pattern analysis and backspatter relevant to gunshot wounds, correct?
Yes.
And he talks about high velocity backspatter and how far it will go, and he indicates that it, quote, usually these minute droplets will be found within 3 or 4 feet of the impact point, correct?
Yes.
And that comes right out of his book, is that right?
Yes.
Stuart James, who had joined us, and I think, as a matter of fact, Mr. James is here. Stuart James has published a lot about this particular issue, correct?
Yes.
You're aware of his book, Principles of Bloodstain Pattern Analysis, is that right?
Yes.
In that book on page 135, Mr. James, who's seated here in the courtroom and also a potential member of the defense team, depending on whether or not he testifies, he indicates, quote, the extremely fine spatter may often only travel 6 to 12 inches. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Mr. James also published with a man named Ecker, and I think Ms. Bodden did, in fact, quote this book, Interpretation of Bloodstained Evidence at Crime Scenes, and that's from back in 1989, wherein Stuart James and William Ecker indicate on page 59, quote, many of the blood droplets produced by this type of impact, and he was referring to high-velocity impact, are extremely small and create a mist-like dispersion, and because of their low density, travel only a short distance, parentheses, 2 to 3 feet, in parentheses, through the air. You're aware of that?
Yes.
And that agrees with your understanding of the physics behind this mist-like spatter pattern analysis, as well as the studies that have been done and published by men like Stuart James and included in edited books by people like Dr. Werner Spitz, correct?
Yes.
And of course, there are others. Aside from the people, I chose a couple of publications of men that I knew would be in the courtroom. You're aware of a paper by Stevens and Allen in the Journal of Forensic Science, published back in 1982.
Yes.
And in that particular case, a .38 caliber revolver was fired into a bloody sponge with no obstruction whatsoever, and the blowback from the high-velocity backspatter was limited to 30 to 50 centimeters. Is that right?
Not blowback, the backspatter.
I may have misused a word. I'm sorry. The backspatter was limited to 30 to 50 centimeters. Is that right?
Correct. I calculated it into inches. I believe it was 11 to 19 inches.
Okay, we've just about exhausted that area, I think. Do you agree? Is there anything that, well, let me rephrase that. Do you have any quarrel with any of the publications or sightings that I've just read to you concerning the general industry consensus about how far mist-like or sub-millimeter-like particles will travel through the air?
Let's take a random detour. Who's seen this yesterday? I like to go back and kind of look at some stuff, especially that's happening in the world on X, on Murder Church. Who's seen this crazy shit yesterday? I posted the video, and I'm going to show it again here. But then we got a story to go with it as well. This shit's fucking crazy, dude. I'm going to show the video first. It's a public building here. Decides to choke this man till he's fucking unconscious. All right. Got a story here as well. This is crazy. Man accused of live streaming attack on DCS caseworker. Hold on for a second. Let me get this. Mesa, Arizona. Man is in custody accused of attacking an Arizona Department of Child Safety caseworker and live streaming it on social media. 32-year-old DeAndre Terrell Johnson was arrested for the crime earlier this week, and they let this fucking dude out also, mind you. He is charged, I believe, with... hold on, I got it up here. Yeah, he's facing serious charges, including attempted first-degree murder and aggravated assault. But they've let this fucking guy back out, either way, from live streaming and recording himself literally trying to kill a motherfucker. Listen to this craziness. When authorities arrived on the scene on Monday, Mesa police received multiple 911 calls from witnesses who reported that Johnson was choking another man in the lobby of the Mesa Tower. The building houses a branch of DCS, Department of Child Safety caseworkers. When authorities arrived at the scene, they found the victim laying on the ground with obvious injuries to his face, police say. Witnesses said Johnson had choked the victim twice. Listen to this shit. According to the court documents, the victim is a caseworker who was working on a case involving this man's daughter. Authorities say Johnson recorded the meeting with the caseworker and live streamed it on Facebook. Investigators described the recording as extremely graphic and clear, stating that Johnson is very identifiable from the live stream. Clearly, court documents say the video of the two shows the two men discussing the case when the victim started to walk away at the end of the meeting. Suddenly, Johnson wraps his arms around the victim's neck and puts him in a chokehold, telling him, "Use a dead man," multiple times. And a coward way to even do that, for fuck's sake. He waits till the man's walking away, puts him in a rear naked choke, had no clue it's coming. Investigators say the victim was in the chokehold for 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Mesa investigators say during that time, the victim is seen on camera with his eyes bulging, drooling, and arm muscles tensing. Multiple bystanders told Johnson to let the victim go. Once the victim was unconscious, Johnson let him go and dropped him face down onto the tile. Johnson reportedly stands over the caseworker until he begins to move slightly. And he says, "You're still breathing. You still breathing?" And he says, I didn't make my fucking point. I'm imagining that says. Court documents say Johnson then wrapped his arms around the victim's neck again, and bystanders yelled at him to let the man go again. So he's choked this man twice. One bystander told Johnson, "You made your point," to which he responded, "No, I didn't," before bending over the victim. He then stood up, turned off the live stream, and left. DCS Deputy Director David Lejon, I'm probably butchering that name, says the video shows how dangerous caseworkers' jobs can be. It's very difficult to watch. I think what was really telling about the video is that the caseworker had more than an hour-long conversation where they are talking calmly. Things seem to be okay. They fist bump, they say goodbye, and then just out of nowhere, out of the blue, this happens. It's a coward piece of shit. Authorities tracked Johnson's vehicle to Scottsdale near McDowell and pulled him over. However, Johnson refused to stop and sped away from police because he just tried to murder a motherfucker. Mesa detectives attempted to use a grappler on Johnson's vehicle, but he continued driving and broke the grapplers. How could you let this fucking guy out, though? That's insanity. This dude's back on the street right now. Officers attempted multiple pit maneuvers and eventually took Johnson into custody. Authorities interviewed the victim, who said he spoke with Johnson a week prior about this daughter. There should be no bail or option for this fucking dude to get out. In that conversation, he allegedly told the caseworker, "I came here to kill you. You're lucky my daughter vouched for you." In that instance, the caseworker was able to calm Johnson down. So he came there already ready to do that, and the caseworker is already in a horrible position in a spot. On the day of the attack, the two men agreed to meet to discuss the services available to Johnson. Court documents say the victim left. He was being aggressive and tried to calm him down. However, when Johnson grabbed and choked him, the victim said, "He just wants to kill me." The victim said there was no other reason for Johnson's behavior. Investigators spoke to the victim's doctor, who said his injuries were absolutely serious. He almost died. He tried to kill this man. So yeah, those charges are fucking warranted. The injured caseworker is out of the hospital and back at home recovering. Johnson was booked on 1 count of attempted first-degree murder, 2 counts of aggravated assault, and 1 count of unlawful flight. He has been arrested before for aggravated assault and drug possession. The incident raises new concerns about the safety DCS staff members face when they meet with parents and other family members. That's a crazy job. Earlier this year, DCS stopped providing security guards just earlier this year at the DCS offices around the state due to budget cuts. Fuck, it looks like you need some, especially in this type of line of work with crazy motherfuckers coming in and thinking you're doing some probably fucked up shit to their kids or trying to take their kids away from them. Lujan said the DCS had protocols to protect caseworkers, everything from having emergency alerts on their phones to requesting a partner when they receive a possible threat. The agency plans to request more safety funding during the next legislative session. But dude, what the actual fuck? We're gonna watch that one more time. Like, the actual cowardness of this fucking piece of shit right here. This is after an hour-long conversation. Daps the dude up as he's leaving, has the camera, looks at it, and pulls him back in to choke him on camera on a live stream. Literally a fucking monster lurking in the streets. That is fucking insane, dude. People have lost their fucking minds, dude. That's all I actually know. Get back over here. Boom. It's crazy, dude. Make sure I get my sound back. I don't want to mess this up. Boom,
And see, as I'm turning pages, everybody's getting a little bit more excited because I'm not actually going to ask a lot of these questions that I originally had written down. KM testing. There is one thing that I want to ask you about KM testing. It was briefly mentioned by Ms. Bodden. There was a backspatter noted by you microscopically. I'm sorry, I should rephrase that. It was noted by you visually on the back of Mr. Spector's right
Jay.
sleeve.
Good morning, man. Welcome in here, brother.
Somewhere close to the tricep area, correct?
Dude, this lady's been on here for a long time. I thought Dr. Pena was up here for quite a long time. I need to get this lady her own emoji, for fuck's sake. Jesus, Lord.
Yes.
All right, if his hands were down, it would actually be on the reverse side of the jacket, back behind
You're the right one, I
the
think.
tricep area, correct?
Yes.
That was a very fine, mist-like spatter, correct?
Yes.
Extremely small,
Yes.
sub-millimeter in size,
Yes.
and ultimately it was KM tested by Mr. Renteria that you're aware of, correct?
Yes.
The KM test literally requires somebody, the tester, to wet a Q-tip, is that right? And try to touch the edge or some other portion of that blood stain, is that right?
As Steve Renteria applies it, he is using a swab that is, the cotton on the swab is the size literally of Q-tips like you clean your ear with.
Okay. Well, you
And-
assume I do.
Yes. and
Buddy Bailey, morning.
he takes that and he applies it to a visible stain.
God, this
He applies the other chemicals for the color reaction,
shot.
and he's sitting there looking
Through in
at
your
that
mornings.
swab for the color reaction. Now, it is sensitive. It can detect blood that's not visible. For example, if you're at a scene and you think somebody took a shower, it could detect blood in the shower drain. But that whole swab is saturated with liquidy kind of blood, multiple cells.
In other words, that might be an example of where you're wiping literally all over a particular area.
Yes,
All
a
right.
large area. In this particular case, because Steve Renteria and I did discuss it, I personally did KM a couple of those before I even turned the jacket over to Steve. And because the blood is spattered onto those onto the fibers, I actually picked part of it off with a tungsten needle, put it down on a piece of filter paper while looking through the stereo microscope, and applied the chemicals to it to actually see the chemical color change. Part of what you want to see is a rapid change. If you leave those swabs laying around after the chemicals are on them, they'll eventually all turn pink. So I did it under the microscope and watched it do an immediate reaction in addition to my visual identification.
So even though, because it was such a small stain and he was applying a relatively large Q-tip, trying to get just the edge of the stain so he doesn't draw the stain off the fabric completely and render it useless, he might very well come up with a KM negative just because he couldn't see the color change.
And the one he originally called me on, I looked at under the scope and it was still on the fiber.
So he
And
missed
not
it.
He missed it.
Okay, which is, when you're dealing with tiny, tiny particulate matter, that's completely understandable.
Yes. My world is a lot smaller than his world.
All right,
He's a big jacket guy and I'm a fiber.
Okay, so let's get into that world. Did you ultimately, microscopically, histologically, look at that particular stain at the cellular level to determine whether or not it was blood?
Yes.
And was it?
Yes.
Which is an absolutely conclusive determination that that was in fact blood.
To me it is.
Okay. I'd like to ask you a quick question about a defense exhibit that Ms. Bodden used. Ms. Bodden, could I see a copy of, I think it's 6U's, if you have it. 6U's. It's, I can't remember the authors. It may have been Bell, showing the trajectories.
As long as sent you an email.
I don't know if you sent an email or not.
Yes, you did.
I don't know.
The fuck? Alright, X is out of control, y'all. Look at I don't even know how the fuck this happens. There's a snake in this fucking sprinkler.
Salam abi. İki tane oldu ilan çıkarıyorum böyle.
What the fuck, dude? He's crawled right up in there perfectly.
Çıkmıyor abi.
Ah, nice. Oh, God!
Gördün mü?
What the fuck, bro?
İki tane oldu.
Oh, it's a geyser.
Salam abi. İki tane.
Yeah, that'd be great.
X is fucking insane. Almost all of these pictures.
That's it. Yeah, 6 U's. You were asked a couple of questions about this by Ms. Bodden, correct?
Yes.
This is a very basic and illustrative dispersion pattern, correct?
Yes.
If I understand this correctly, the further you get from the point of impact, or the impact point, the greater the dispersion pattern of the dispersion is going to be, correct?
Yes, given that there's nothing impeding it or asymmetrical about it, it's, in theory, is a cone
Okay.
that
And-
goes out and up 3 dimensions.
All right, like the Big Bang. As the further it moves away, it's moving. The particles are moving further and further apart. Correct?
Watch it, I've been to JPL.
We don't even want to.
We don't want to go into
No, we don't.
astrophysics, please.
Let me see if I can get this back down to my level, which is very basic. May I, Your Honor? So if I understand you correctly, if the impact point might be where you are, a dispersion pattern may be, for instance, down to the floor and all the way over my head as we are looking at that graphic, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but the closer I get, if I take a step in, the dispersion pattern is narrowing. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and if I get closer, it's narrowing even further.
Yes.
And if I continue to get closer to the impact point, it's narrowing even further, correct?
Yes.
My understanding is you found blood, the pattern of blood on Mr. Spector's jacket at about mid-thigh level on me. It may be a little bit further down on him if I'm a couple of inches taller than he is, and about up to the breast level on the left panel of the jacket. Is that right?
Yes.
You didn't find any on his shoulder, correct?
No.
You didn't find any on his pants beneath the jacket?
No.
So is I know you guys remember this guy, especially being hardcore true crime peeps. So is this guy a demon from actual hell? I know you guys remember Stephen McDaniel. I did a video. This is one of the first videos I did was on this guy, like early, publicly buzzed. This motherfucker, if you guys remember this interrogation, and I'm just randomly pulling some bullshit up here, but doesn't fucking move, dude, except for his head and the way he answers questions during this. But this is in fast, ultra fast motion. And look at him. Look how creepy he is. Like, he doesn't, he's so, like, so much is happening. So much time is passing, and he doesn't fucking really move his body. He's a demon from hell. I think he's a demon from hell.
I'm telling you like it is, baby.
Like, one of the creepiest dudes ever. He's the one that was interviewed on the news when they found the chick's body that he put in the fucking dumpster. He killed his neighbor. Dude, I'll never forget this fucking dude. Creepy as shit, man.
One of the other things that Ms. Bodden asked you
Stephen McDaniel.
several
I wonder what
questions
that
about,
fuck
as a matter of
is
fact, she
doing
spent
right
some time on
Probably
this, is
creepy
whether
as
or not
fuck to
the,
a
thank you
cellmate.
very much, appreciate it, whether or not the
It does, man.
pattern
That's
on
one of the creepiest
Miss
fucking dudes. When they
Carson's
tell him,
dress with-
because he's all, when literally the news lady says, well, yeah, they found a body, he just goes completely white, has to sit down, like, it's insane. Like,
is exactly like the pattern on Mr.
he
Spector.
killed his neighbor. He was stalking her and stuck into her apartment and murdered her, put the body in the dumpster, goes on about his business, literally being interviewed on the news. Oh, you know, you were the neighbor. What did you know? Oh, I don't know anything. We're all just so worried and looking for her. Well, and then the news lady says something along the, well, they found some stuff. And he's like, what? What? Starts having an absolute fucking freak out, dude. Hold on, I'll get it.
Here's
And that's the crazy part, too. I'll pop my own video.
I'll rephrase
interview
it.
thing.
I
It's
thought
crazy.
the word exact was in there, but I'll take it out. Let's assume that her question was closer to whether or not there was a consistent proportionality between Mr. Spector's jacket and Lana.
Yeah, just real quick. I want to, like, this is fucking nuts. This is how this fucking guy got caught. I'm sure most people have seen this. Anybody that hasn't, it's incredibly interesting. So yeah, at this point, he has murdered his neighbor and gotten rid of her body.
Living there?
Yeah, Lauren was my neighbor. We're just trying to find out where she is at this point. I mean, no one has seen her since Saturday. I mean, the last time anyone heard from her was an email that she sent out, and no one's heard from her since.
Did you see her hang out with anyone at the time, anything like that?
I mean, no one has seen her since Saturday. I haven't seen anything. I mean, I've always heard noise outside, but it's just people walking by pretty much.
And she just recently graduated from Mercer?
Yeah, she and I were both JD students. We graduated back in May.
What kind of person was she? I mean, what did you see?
Wait for it.
She's as nice as can be. I mean, very personable,
Wait
very
for
much
it.
people person.
Do you know any enemies she might have had, somebody that might want to hurt her?
No, we don't know where she is. I mean, the only thing we can think is that maybe she went out running and someone snatched her. Because we went over. One of her friends had a key. We went inside and tried to see if there was anything amiss, but
Yeah, Drew.
she had a door jamb that was sitting right by it, so there was no sign that anyone broke in. I mean, the door was locked when everyone got here. I mean, we just don't know where she is.
What about in the parking lot area? I know they've been doing a lot of, I think that's where they had recovered the body or whatever they recovered from there.
Body?
Had you seen anything there? Had you seen anything there? I mean, we don't know if this is the same person.
She just disclosed that they found a body, and look at his fucking heart drop.
We just don't know where she is.
What about in the parking lot area? I know they've been doing a lot of, I think that's where they had recovered the body or whatever they recovered from there.
Body?
Had you seen anything there? Had you seen anything there? I mean, we don't know if this is the same person. You know what I mean? Like, they took out a body there earlier. We don't know if it's the same person or not. So that's why we're trying to ask people if they know who lived there. Are you okay, sir?
I think I need to sit
Dude.
down.
Okay.
He has to go and sit down after being told that live on the fucking news, dude. And he fucking killed his neighbor, bro. Like, oh, insane. Actually fucking insane.
Clarkson's slip dress and the pattern that you saw on them, okay?
It's a crazy one. It's a really wild one for no one that knows about that one. I do have a YouTube video about it as well. Yo, Sam? Yeah, dude. I showed that to start that out, Joe. Welcome in here also. But yeah, he just sits there. He doesn't move at all except his head to look at everyone questioning him. He's just completely stiff. And he doesn't really say a lot. Like, they're just trying to get anything out of him. He's just like, yes. No. Yes. Like, it's fucking weird. Very weird, dude. Oh, shit. My bad. Sorry, guys. I always do that shit.
So let me ask you one or two more
It's a
questions
crazy one,
about
though.
that. So you would not expect, as a forensic scientist, as a criminalist, to find the exact same pattern on Mr. Spector's jacket as you necessarily find on Lana Clarkson's slip dress, because there are intervening factors like guns are in the way, possibly hands are in the way, hair may be in the way. Things like arms may be in the way.
Correct. They're in different places and different orientations.
All right. And given that, you would expect to find differences in what you find on him versus what you find on her, even if they're next to each other.
Yes.
Ms. Bodden followed up by asking you several questions about what wasn't on Mr. Spector. The fact that you didn't find blood spatter on his pants, correct?
Correct.
The fact that you didn't find blood spatter on his shirt, correct?
Correct.
Well, his shirt was being worn, as you understand it, under his jacket. Is that right?
I assume so. My knowledge is that the jacket was recovered on the second floor.
All right. Assuming that, don't even assume that. I think we all know where I'm going with that. With regard to the pants, Ms. Bodden asked you several times whether or not you found any blood whatsoever other than the pocket area, any blood spatter on Mr. Spector's pants. Have you, I think you may have cited this to us, you've heard the phrase,
it's pretty damn good, Sam.
precept, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Correct.
Do you know who Paul Kish is?
Yes.
Who's Paul Kish?
Paul Kish is actually a co-editor, along with Stuart James, of
Ordered for us.
the book that you were referring to, and he also is an instructor, along with Stuart James, for a number of bloodstain pattern classes. He is a practicing bloodstain pattern analyst.
And you're aware that he is a member of the defense team as well, as a consultant at least?
Yes.
Are you aware of the following publication from the Journal of Forensic Identification, published back in 1996, where he was a guest editor? And he editorialized and wrote an article called, oddly enough, Absence of Evidence is Not Evidence of Absence. Have you read that article?
Yes.
In that article, does he say the following? Cindy, I'll try to read this relatively slow. Quote, "The complete absence of blood stains on a defendant or his clothing is frequently assumed by many to be definitive evidence that the defendant did not directly participate in a violent act. This is a misconception fostered and exploited by those who have insufficient knowledge and experience in bloodstain pattern interpretation, or by those who hope that such an opinion would aid in their client's defense. Explanations for the lack of blood staining on an individual who has actively participated in a violent act
Thanks everyone for being here. Appreciate it, guys.
These include the assailant cleaning up prior to his being apprehended, removal of his clothing prior to committing the act, or simply not being stained because the spattered blood was intercepted by some intermediate target," end quote. Are you aware of Mr. Kish's recitation of that particular, or that opinion in that particular paper?
Yes.
Do you agree with that opinion?
It's a generally held concept in all of trace evidence, whether it's blood or other fiber transfers. The absence of evidence is not exculpatory. It is more an inconclusive conclusion. We can't say one way or the other.
So if a scientist were to say, or anybody were to opine, any expert were to opine that they would expect to see more blood on Mr. Spector because he was, if in fact he was close to the bloodletting event, that would be an incorrect statement based on the scientific literature.
Overruled. You may answer.
That would be an incorrect statement because in this case, the blood staining you have at the scene and on the clothing is what it is, and we are using that information to relatively place people and objects at the scene. We are not using that staining information, for example, to provide investigative information where we're saying, okay, based on this pattern, go out and look for a 9mm gun. That's a whole different line of reasoning. In this case, we know the location. We know it's a single gunshot wound that is not through and through. We have a limited physical area. We've determined that there was only one bleeder, and we have a given number of bloody objects that can move about the location. So we're interpreting the patterns we see in that location based on that kind of known information.
Concerning what was and wasn't there, Ms. Bodden also showed you a photograph from a publication it looked like this. I'm not sure if she marked it or not. Ms. Button, did you mark this?
Yes.
This is the photo of what appears to be backspatter. I think it may be from one of Mr. James's books, Principles of Bloodstain Pattern Analysis Theories and Practice. And I don't know, quite frankly, what this was marked as. This is a... 6 V's?
Yes.
Okay. V to the 6th power. All right, this photograph was shown to you and passed out to the jurors, as a matter of fact.
I just leave this back here today, sir.
That photograph, to your understanding, was taken following the mechanism of a bullet being fired through a piece of white paper or card stock, something like that, and 6 inches away, 6 inches, a soaked, bloody sponge, correct?
Yes.
All right. That photograph is the backspatter that emanated from that particular mechanism, that gunshot, correct?
Yes.
Is this the backspatter that we should expect to find in every case, every real human case?
No.
Why not?
Depends on the case circumstances and the distance. In fact, you do not find backspatter in many, many cases. More often than not, the papers I've read indicate that a third of the time or less do you even find backspatter in gunshot wound cases.
So, to suggest that if Mr. Spector's jacket didn't look like this, he couldn't have fired the gun, that would be, all right, let me put this a different way. To suggest that Mr. Spector's jacket, if it didn't look like this, he wasn't close enough to have fired the gun, that would be an incorrect statement, not based in any science, correct?
Correct. That's not the proper reasoning.
As a matter of fact, Lana Clarkson's slip dress didn't look like that, did it?
No.
And we know where she was when the gunshot was fired, correct?
Yes.
That was a photograph from an exposed sponge, not covered by skin, correct?
Correct.
There was no hair involved,
No.
to your understanding, correct?
No.
There was no arm in front of the white piece of paper at the time of the spattering event.
No.
There was no gun in between the sponge and the spattering event. I'm sorry, between the sponge and the white paper.
No.
Certainly there were no lips or teeth or gums or cheeks between the sponge and the white paper, correct?
No.
If in fact Ms. Clarkson was shot through the back of the throat into her soft palate.
Coming for some of this
would you
lasagna,
expect
Jay.
That a lot of the backspatter
We talking about
that you
out
might get.
Yo,
ordinarily
Sarah
from the
getting in
impact
here.
point would
Debbie
be absorbed
arriving this morning.
into the
Morning, guys.
flesh of the surrounding area.
Tomatoes and peppers. That sounds awesome.
Oral cavity, the cheeks, the
Whoa.
gums, the mucosa, the teeth.
It's possible, typically forward spatter, which in this case was contained in the head,
Dude, she's been up here
is
for
much
a
greater than
minute.
backspatter. If backspatter occurs, you can't really easily predict how much, and you shouldn't predict, how much do you expect based on it being a mouth shot or a head shot. You can do that in a laboratory study for the purposes of studying the dynamics of these events as the science has evolved. But you can't apply
bake
that
lasagna. That's a
to
party,
a
bro.
case and say, I expect if
party.
you were shot
All day, every
in the
day.
head, in the right temple versus here versus there, that you would have this much blood. You simply
It's heaven.
can't do that.
Yo,
with,
Shelley, thank you so much, Pokemon, for
case-specific
the
circumstances being
shout out.
a myriad of
Share of the stream
possibilities.
this morning.
You simply apply your interpretation to what evidence is there rather than what isn't there, correct?
Correct, although sometimes what isn't there is important too. We call that void areas in the bloodstain pattern world. When you have a spatter and then there's a space indicating that something was blocking it, for example.
You've told us about that with regard to your examination of the chair. There was a void area where Ms. Clarkson's body was, correct?
Yes.
Right. And then you saw a spatter to the right where there was no void area, and behind on the arm, the upright back portion, rear-facing portion of the right arm of the chair, correct?
Yes.
By the way, Ms. Bodden asked you a couple of questions about the orientation of Ms. Clarkson's head. Did you take into consideration in coming to your determination about the orientation of her head being slightly to the right as opposed to straight forward or to the left, the fact that the blood spatter appeared to be predominantly on the right side of the chair?
Yes, that in addition to the apparent position of her head allowing for bleeding to occur over the back side of her right shoulder, her head would have had to have rested in that position for some period of time while she was bleeding from the wound.
And of course, there was spatter that you saw on her purse, correct?
Yes.
Which side was her purse on?
The right side.
All right. Ms. Bodden asked you a couple of questions about air currents causing the droplets to waft in the air and move further than the 2 to 3 feet that you talked about in the possible
always in the eyes, isn't it?
theoretical extra foot, that possible extra 4th foot that you've talked about. Do you remember those questions?
I'm always looking
Yes.
deep into the eyes, for real. You
You looked at the crime scene photographs, correct?
Yes.
Was there a fan
That sounds crazy.
behind Ms. Clarkson's head?
Can't
No.
you
Did
shouldn't even say
there appear
that.
to be an
I think it's real.
I guess I need to ask this to make sure that the record's clear. You didn't have any indication that there was a hurricane in that foyer, did you?
No.
No indication
We've
that there
all
was
met
a tornado
somebody.
in the foyer,
You're
did
like,
you?
No.
All right. So the normal
I'm
laws
gonna
of
go over here.
physics, you would assume, would be applied to the area in the foyer at about 5 a.m. on February 3rd, 2003, as you would in any other crime scene, correct? No hurricanes, no tornadoes, no fans blowing.
No.
If you're not membered up here on YouTube, make sure you do get membered up. First of all, if you become a member, you get a spot on a wheel for a possible t-shirt, but also I'm going to start working through some footage that I got recently. I do a lot of footage that is specific to members, and the next one is going to be last Saturday. Me and Dan went and hung out at this, I'm calling it a beer fest. It was on Oktoberfest, but it was in November because of the hurricane situation, but it was a pretty swanky little deal, and I got a lot of footage that will only be released to members.
I just need a quick couple of seconds, Dr. Harold. By the way, there was one photograph, and I don't think we need to show the photograph. We've all seen it several different times. There's a photograph of Ms. Bodden called it an exclamation point style or sized blood stain on Ms. Clarkson's left hand, basically in the webbing of her left thumb. Is the gunshot the only spattering event that could have caused that blood stain?
The presence of that blood stain is not inconsistent with back spatter from the gunshot, and it does have directionality, and it does have dimensions that you could, in theory, measure. But the other thing you have to remember about blood stain pattern work is you're talking impact angles and direction relative from source to target. And when you have two movable targets or two movable objects, you have to be careful on how you interpret it. So if you said, for example, that this drop impacted at a 10-degree angle, that could be 10 degrees this way. You have to bear in mind it's source to target.
Right.
Another possibility is if the face was wiped with the wet diaper or even the dry diaper, you could have another spattering
Videos on X are
event
so fucking
being
insane,
caused
dude.
by that wiping motion.
Like,
if the diaper got
fuck.
saturated enough to allow drops to come off of it. I would have to say it doesn't appear to be dilute in the picture, but the picture is such poor quality that I would not draw that as a firm conclusion in this case. Hence my statement, I cannot specifically place her hands based on the documentation of the hands and the blood associated with it.
So there are at least two events that you've explained that could account for that particular, almost a rogue spatter by itself. One is the obvious gunshot, that bloodletting event. The other is if the face was wiped and a bloody rag was used. That could, as a hand is drawn across or something, that could snap off a little drop of blood and it could leave that pattern, correct?
Yeah, not exactly snap, but okay.
Best word I could come up with. It's the best scientific word I could come up with at this hour.
There's other movements, that occurred over a period of time that, for a single spatter that I can't see well, I'm not going to form a positive opinion on and commit to that as being a mechanism when there's other possibilities.
Dr. Harrell, Ms. Bodden also asked you about the blood stain that was sent to you. It was photographed and ultimately sent to you by Dr. Henry Lee, correct?
Yes.
And that was the blood stain. You reviewed the photographs.
Yes.
That was a blood stain, at least according to the information that you received from the defense, that was found directly beneath the banister, correct?
Correct.
On that second step. Is that right?
Correct.
Did you ever have an opportunity to determine the size of that particular blood stain?
Yes.
Okay. What did you determine the size to be approximately?
Approximately 5 millimeters by 5 millimeters.
Certainly not what you would consider to be high velocity backspatter.
No.
And it did not have that exclamation point, telltale exclamation point shape to it, correct?
No, it actually appeared to be a drip off the banister. The banister,
I literally
the
can't even tell
curling
what's real and what's
scroll
not anymore.
work above it had blood smeared on it, and it is actually in the photographs you can see what appears to be a drip coming down the side. And if you drop a plumb line down, it is right in line with that drop of the plumb line and with the little forward momentum.
It's real. I gotta show you guys another one. Is this real or is this AI? What the fuck is even happening anymore? Is it planned somehow? What the fuck is going on? What the fuck, dude? Everything's insane.
Maybe 1 centimeter.
All right. And that was, of course, the only stain in that area that you were aware of?
That I'm aware of, yes.
Ms. Bodden asked you if you reviewed the photographs in an effort to try to find, I wrote down a missing white thing. That's probably not exactly how she put it, but a small white object at the scene. And I think Ms. Bodden was referring to a photograph that indicated that there was something white on the right heel of Miss Clarkson's shoe that was not there when you actually received the shoes, correct?
Yes, it was in the, not the heel such as the bottom of the shoe, but on the heel area, the side of the shoe.
Okay. Did you take a pretty close look at those shoes in an effort to make a determination of what that might have been?
Yes.
Did the outside heel area on the outside of the shoe where the photographs indicate that white thing was, did it have some residual adhesive looking stuff to it?
Yes.
And you're aware that there was a Band-Aid that was found on the outside?
I just keep a feed of my literal X feed just kind of up on the side at all times, and every time I see something kind of crazy, this morning is just particularly wild as fuck. Holy shit. Forrest Nelson coming through here in the chat, gifting out some, oh man, being awesome in the chat and gifting out some memberships. Love to see it. Holy shit. Let me give you some love. Welcome in, everybody. And also, thank you so much, Forrest. Appreciate that, dude. Who got those things? Let's see. Donna Chansey, welcome in here. And what I was just talking about, anybody lurking back there, now that you're a member, you're going to be able to see some really cool content. I've already got some specific content that is only for you guys. One thing that I'm doing also for Feral Fridays, after those, not everyone, you know, if there's something that I want to leave up, like this last one, the giveaway, I kind of want to leave that up. But those are going to be turned on to members only also. So the next day, any replay crew will probably only get those. But lots of exclusive content is going to be coming your way and is already on there. Pumpkin Porter, also welcome in here. Mystery Train, welcome in here. Ashley, welcome in here. And Vicky Kennedy, thank you again. Forrest, let's fucking go. Forrest ain't messing around, son. That's what I'm talking about. Love it. Love to see it. Yeah.
Hold up.
Get them beers in the chat. Get them liquor drinks in the chat. Get them murder churches and hell yes in the chat. That's what I'm talking about. Anytime we get anybody, new folks membered up in here, I like to show it off and let them know they're appreciated. Thank you all so much.
Side of Miss Clarkson's pantyhose, correct?
Yes.
And
Forrest, let me get you on this wheel for a possible shirt win. Giving away a shirt as soon as we can get 12 names on this thing.
I guess I should say the shoes appeared relatively new because there was a label that was still attached to the heel, correct?
The shoes appeared very new. They actually didn't have any foot imprint or even, you know how your shoes get the outline of your feet.
Yeah, $250
there
for
was
Forrest.
no
always a
dirt
giver.
or
Forrest getting double
inside the
time.
shoe.
Thank you so much,
There
Sinead.
was a
Appreciate that.
residual paper label in the insole.
Okay.
Hell yeah.
And that paper label had
Forrest
adhesive
might
on
get a
one
shirt,
side,
baby.
correct?
Yes.
Did that paper label appear to be completely intact?
No.
Describe that for us.
It was a adhesive with a white.
Damn, rolling through right now. Kathy coming through with a 420. Hell yeah, Kathy. Appreciate that. Through the Venmo machine also back there. Really appreciate that. Yeah, don't forget, guys, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, all of that is friend to friend, basically. So I get all of that. Thank you so much, Kathy. Appreciate that. Fuck yeah. Getting you on there for a possibility of a t-shirt.
Paper, and it was.
It's awesome. You guys are too nice.
Not torn, but kind of abraded. And then on the inside of the right heel, there was some residual paper and adhesive. And it's possible that that label worked itself loose from being new and worked its way up and over the
Best
edge
folks in the Buzz Nation.
of the
That's what I
shoe.
say.
Okay, that's certainly one possibility, correct?
It's possible.
And that would be consistent with your finding
Best
of
folks in the Buzz
adhesive on the outside of the heel, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You're aware that there is, in this case, another missing item from the crime scene, correct?
Yes.
Or potentially there's a missing item from the crime scene, correct?
Yes.
All right, I want to give you a hypothetical. Ms. Bodden asked you about Dr. Lee and him sending you certain information in a FedEx package, and you've already described that FedEx package to us and when you got that. Assume for purposes of my hypothetical, well, I should ask you this first. You've indicated to Ms. Bodden on cross-examination and to me a couple of different times that one of the things that you were unable to do is specifically position Mr. Clarkson's hands at the time the shot was fired, correct?
Correct.
Let me ask you a couple of questions about that. Assume for purposes of this next question a series of facts, all right? Assume for purposes of this hypothetical that an attorney for the defendant, Mr. Spector, was at the location of the foyer area along with certain other defense experts, including Dr. Henry Lee, after the crime scene had been given over to the defense team on February 4th, 2003. And by the way, for
Michelle, for real, I like
hypothetical,
her, man. She's cool.
because everybody may not be aware.
Knows her
When
shit,
I talk to you
don't
about
take
an
no
attorney
shit.
for the defendant, I'm not talking about anybody on the
Like-
current defense team, okay? As a matter of fact, just assume that her name was Sarah Kaplan. This attorney saw on the ground in the foyer area what she described to be a small, white, flat, solid object with uneven edges. She described it to be about the size of a fingernail when she was asked. Assume for purposes of my hypothetical that she pointed it out to Dr. Henry Lee. Dr. Henry Lee looked at it and then recovered this small, white, flat object with tweezers and put that object in a vial and put a stopper in the vial. Assume for purposes of this question that Dr. Henry Lee was the last person in whose possession that fingernail-sized item was seen. Assume for purposes of my question that that item has never been turned over to the court or to the prosecution or to any one of the defense attorneys. That that item was, in fact, last seen in Dr. Lee's possession and has not been seen since. If that small, my question is this, Dr. Harold, if that small, white, flat object had in fact been properly turned over either to the court or to the prosecution and ultimately turned over to you, would that have assisted you in your ability to reconstruct other parts of this crime scene potentially?
Maybe, and maybe not.
All right. Describe that to us, please. What do you mean by that answer?
When you have any object that is picked up at a crime scene, you treat it as potential evidence. The first thing you need to do is confirm what it is or identify what it is. Sometimes you pick up something because you don't know what it is and whether it's relevant or not. So we're back to the I need to know what it is, and not because somebody told me what it was, but I do something that will positively identify what it is. Frequently when working crime scenes, objects may appear to be, you're working in less than good environmental conditions, so they're not always what they were.
Yeah, she's always thinking about it, right?
When you pick them up. So
like her,
first you
man.
need to confirm what it is. Then you ask yourself,
wants to give the best
where
possible
did this
answer.
come from? What is its possible source? And then you ask yourself, what has that got to do with the rest of the information?
That's the name of an
that you have
album,
about
ready to
the
happen.
case? And it may or may not be relevant to the case. You don't know if you don't have the object to examine whether it is important or not.
So it could have been important,
It could have.
and you will never know because you don't have it.
Correct.
That item, or an item that can reasonably be described as looking like that item, has never been turned over to you or the Scientific Services Bureau of the Los Angeles County Crime Lab, correct?
Correct.
Dr. Harold, my last question, despite any missing or potentially missing evidence or concealed
Fence
evidence,
is going to cross for 3
were
weeks.
you still able to scientifically analyze what was present at the scene and make scientific conclusions about the relative positions of Lana Clarkson, of the gun, and of Philip Spector's white jacket?
Yes.
Thank you.
How much time are you going to need?
About 15 minutes.
We're going to break for the day. We'll take it up. We'll meet you in the morning and then we'll be finished.
She's not even done yet. They're not done with her.
9:30. Ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind the admonition will resume at 9:30
She should have brought a
tomorrow
tent,
morning.
just camped
Counsel,
out right
please
there.
remain.
Everyone in this
You may
trial
step
should have
down. Thank
actually
you.
just been sleeping in the courtroom. Bring a tent. We have another matter to
The
discuss,
jurors
it
and the
looks like.
alternates have left. I want to, so everyone's aware of what the situation with Ms. Kaplan is. My clerk has been in contact with Mr. Nassatir. Mr. Nasser has indicated to my clerk that the writ will be filed with the Supreme Court by the close of business tomorrow. Based upon that, I am going to further stay her confinement until 3 o'clock on Thursday, which will be the 28th of June, and that is prior to the time we will be quitting for the day.
June 28th, 2007.
If the court has acted
Feels like
before
not that
that
long
time,
ago.
either by issuing a
my
further
God.
stay or granting a hearing or
time.
doing something proactive along those lines, then obviously she doesn't have to be present. But if for any reason the court has not acted by that time, Ms. Kaplan is to be present in court, and she is to be prepared to go into custody or to testify, one of the two. Clerk will communicate that to Mr. Nasser.
And we'll be prepared to put on witnesses until that time.
Exactly, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll see you tomorrow at 9:30.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right.
Jerry Wayne, welcome in. Where are we going next? I'm interested to see. Okay, part 10 is only 24 minutes. Maybe this will be the finale here. Good Lord, folks. Everyone in here this morning, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Coming into Murder Church. If you have not and you're lurking back there, please hit the like. That does help us out. And hopefully you're subbed up. Yeah, we're going to keep on rocking and rolling and moving here this morning. One thing I do want to do, I got a teaser here. The next trial, next case, the next one that I'm diving into more heavily, you're going to be seeing some shows coming up, probably even one this week. And I know on the 15th there's another motion hearing, is the Courtney Clinny case. So you'll get ready for that. Hopefully everyone will come through. If you see that on your feed, come in and hang out in the chat or watch the old replay as well. If you're not in on some Feral Fridays, guys, this last Friday we had a really good time. We started this new show. It's an Australian television show from 1979, ran till 86. There's a fuck ton of episodes. We got through 3 of them on Feral Friday. Prisoner. It's insane. It's really freaking good. It's amazing, actually. I love it. The vibe and the grittiness of it is off the charts. Like, it's my fucking jam. And it's easy to have fun while you watch it and make fun of while you watch it. It's pretty fucking nuts. And also, it's actually good. Like, it's truly good. Like, I need to break some clips out and try to get people hyped up for it. But everyone, thank y'all so much for being in here. I appreciate it. We have 4 names on the wheel this morning. We're trying to build this thing up to give away a Publicly Buzzed t-shirt. Let me go over here and show the nice, beautiful folks what we got in the shop over here real quick, because we do got some cool shirts, folks. Boom. This one's staying, actually. I'm letting the Skeleton Crew shirt stay. These, of course, did go out. They said so. I need to just take them actually down completely. But yeah, lots of cool shirts in here. And if you actually go in here and actually hit t-shirts, a lot more pop up also. So if you guys end up winning one, make sure you go in there and take a good look. Holly Berry just actually ordered this one, the classic PB logo, which I also have stickers for. Excited about that. But yeah, we're trying to give away a shirt. And again, as soon as we reach 12 names, we will be doing just that. Thank you all so much. I'm thinking maybe tomorrow I'm going to try to work it out. I'm going to be doing the Courtney Clinny show, breakdown, introduction to the case, whatever you want to call it, see how that works out. And then, like I said before, this Saturday, I need to work this out as well. I've got a professional. I've got somebody that has some inside information on some Sarah Boone details that I'm going to be getting in here and getting an interview with. So, yeah, a lot of interesting, cool stuff coming through with the Buzz Nation. And, yeah, we're still doing the damn thing. And there we go. That's what I'm talking about. Carolyn A. coming through, becoming a Buzzed Confused member. Hell yeah. And also getting on the wheel for a possibility of a shirt. Love it. Welcome in here as well. And again, I've got some more. Also, something coming from Publicly Buzzed at all times, guys. I've also got another cool, completely different type of video that's coming for the members. So I'm always trying to do a little something for the folks that give back here to Publicly Buzzed and to Gypsy. And yeah, really appreciate it, guys. We're up to 5 names now. Thank you so much. Beers in the chat. Get some, show some love out here for Carolyn getting in here. Beers, Meowder's church stickers in there. I got the Murder Church sticker. The hell yeah. A little probably nothing with the lighter, if you know what I'm talking about. Bada bing, bada boom. That's what I'm talking about, guys. Love it. Buzz Nation is where it's at. Let a friend know about it. Welcome in here. Love it. Yeah, that's I'm always publicly buzzed and confused. Then you were in the right freaking place. I'm telling you right now. Give you one of these. I'm telling you like it is, baby. All right, let's keep rocking here. See how much longer we got with Dr. Lynn Harold.
Larry Paul Fiddler, judge presiding.
All right, the defendant's present with his counsel. The district attorneys are present. The jurors, alternates,
Keep it rolling, baby.
Previously
That's all we
sworn
can
and so
do.
oath are present. And I understand, Mr. Jackson, you want to reopen to ask a question or two.
Very briefly, I simply forgot, and Dr. Harold, the plethora of things that we've gone through over the last few days, I forgot to ask you one question. It's going to be very simple. On Tuesday, you testified that
I think I still got
with regard to the
5
diaper and the
memberships I
clotting
can
of the
gift
blood
out
on
as
the
well
diaper.
for free.
You recall that testimony?
Stick
Yes.
around
You
and might get one of
indicated,
those. I'll be right back.
Showing the jurors an example of the clotted blood on the diaper. You indicated right here is an example of some what we call stringy clotted blood. When blood
different
leaves the
day
body,
now?
it starts
Oh,
to
my
clot,
Lord.
and after a
This
period
lady.
of time, it becomes stringy, and this is sitting on the surface of the diaper. My single question, Dr. Harold, that I forgot to ask you is, how long does it take for blood to clot in the manner in which you described?
Literature references will cite anywhere from 3 to 15 minutes. It's dependent on a number of environmental factors, including the surface it's on, the humidity, the temperature. So that's an approximation. In some instances, it can take as long as an hour for it to get to the clotted stringy, what I call stringy. And by stringy, I mean when you have a pool of blood, if you run something like a glass rod or a stick through it, it will pull a gelatinous-looking thread of clotted blood up out of the pool, as opposed to the entire mass being clotted
That's what you
and
described as
solid.
clotted, or stringy.
Stringy,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you, Dr. Harold and counsel. Thank you very much for your patience. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Your Honor, thank you. I have nothing further.
All right, thank you. You may proceed.
Dr. Harold, yesterday when Mr. Jackson talked to you on redirect, you talked about the laws of physics, correct?
Yes,
Do you understand that there was an explosion of a gun inside Lana Clarkson's mouth?
yes,
Do you understand what the laws of physics are related to an explosion?
basically, yes.
Do you understand that small items and particles in an explosion will go further than they will when it's a regular backspatter?
No,
Did you read the books of Dr. Kish and Dr. James that you mentioned yesterday?
yes,
Okay, and you also talked about an article with Dr. Kish, and you said you indicated there were 3 areas that he talked about. One where there was a cleanup, that you wouldn't find blood spatter, correct?
I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't talk to Dr. Kish.
Well, we know that you have not talked to Dr. Kish, but in the article that Mr. Jackson referred to you, Dr. Kish indicated that there may not be blood spatter on a alleged defendant when there's a cleanup, correct?
Oh, you're referencing a different article, not his book.
I'm referencing the article that you discussed yesterday with Mr. Jackson. He indicated that there wouldn't be blood spatter if there was a cleanup, correct?
Slow down.
You said to me, I discussed an article with Dr. Kish from his book. That's not what you're referring to. I take it you mean the article, the guest editorial published by Dr. Kish that District Attorney Jackson referred to.
Dr. Kish indicated that sometimes you won't find blood spatter when there was a cleanup, correct?
In that article? Yes.
And in fact, you reviewed, did you not, the nurse's notes with regard to whether or not there was...
I got a egg, sausage, and cheese biscuit from Jimmy John's in the air fryer. I don't know if anybody purchases those, but the cheese that comes with that is weird, right? It's like a tiny little fucking square of incredibly orange cheese. I always throw that cheese away and then get my own cheese, real cheese on there. But Yeah, you got to make those things in the air fryer. Who's making those? There's our folks making those in microwaves out here.
There's any trace evidence in Mr. Spector's hair at the hospital, correct?
His hair?
Air fryers.
His hair.
Make those actually pretty eatable.
I reviewed what information was available, and I do not recall.
Got to get rid of that weird cheese, though.
Specifically, let me think for a moment. I do recall that there was nothing recovered from his hair.
Jessica. Morning.
There was nothing recovered from inside his ears, correct?
Correct.
You didn't find any blood spatter on his pants, right?
Correct.
You didn't find any blood spatter on his shirt?
Correct.
You didn't find any of his socks?
Correct.
And the police never gave you his shoes to examine, right?
Correct.
Okay. And Dr. Kish also indicated in that article that sometimes that somebody won't have spatter on them because they can remove their clothing before they actually do a spattering event or engage in a spattering event, right?
That's one of the reasons that he gave, yes.
Did you have any indication here that Mr. Spector removed all of his clothing and just left his jacket on at the time this gunshot went off?
No, I wasn't there.
Okay. And Dr. Kish also indicated that sometimes something could intercept blood spatter and not be on objects, correct?
Correct.
But here there was some spatter on Mr. Spector's clothing, correct?
Yes.
And therefore it was not intercepted, right?
And therefore
it was not intercepted by anything else.
Oh, the blood that is on the white jacket was not intercepted by something else, or it would have been on something else and not on the white jacket.
And then when you refer to Dr. Spitz's book, you understand that in his book he was not talking about spatter from intraoral wounds. Don't you understand that?
I didn't refer to Dr. Spitz's book, Alan Jackson did.
When you answered the question concerning Dr. Spitz's book, you understand that Dr. Spitz was not referring to intraoral wounds, correct?
It's so bright orange. I just toss it and I get my own cheese. I get the real cheese.
I would have to have the question read back to me.
And plus it's a lot bigger and covers it.
I believe I was asked if Dr. Spitz's book cites back spatter going a certain distance, to which I answered yes.
Do you understand? Did you ever speak to Dr. Spitz and ask him whether he was referring to intraoral gunshot wounds in that section?
No, I've not been permitted to speak with the defense experts in this case.
Did you ever speak to Dr. James ever on any case and ask him whether he was talking about intraoral gunshot wounds in his book?
I don't remember if we specifically addressed the issue of intraoral versus other gunshot wounds when he and I had conversations together, not relative to this case, but other experiences.
Do you understand Dr. DeMaio in his book is not speaking about intraoral gunshot wounds in terms of the distance back spatter goes? Do you understand that?
No, I don't understand that because the way it is stated, you can't exclude that possibility.
Did you ever call him up at any time and ask him whether he was speaking about intraoral gunshot wounds?
No, in this case, we've been prevented from communicating with the defense experts.
Did you ever review their reports?
Yes.
Now, speaking about another article you mentioned yesterday when Mr. Jackson questioned you an article about back to Jim Peck's, correct?
Yes.
And we've already discussed the fact that you never spoke to Mr. Peck's about what case he was speaking about in this article. But you did say yesterday that
they confiscated it. Why would they confiscate it though?
Does
Isn't
not
it
travel
not food?
more than,
I mean, you can buy food.
3 feet
she's
or 4 feet in
she's
his
making
article,
a cheese gun in there. Who knows what she's doing with this cheese?
I have to look back at it because I have several published articles floating around, and I would want to confirm that. Those articles cite distances actually less than 3 feet, but they are laboratory studies.
Understand that. And you understand that in Mr. Peck's article, he was talking about blood spatter that was 1/10 of a millimeter in size, correct?
Yes.
He was not talking about blood spatter between 0.2 of a millimeter and 1 millimeter, correct?
If I'm recalling the numbers out of PECS correctly, yes.
And in fact...
Shit, Pam coming through, and I love it. $10 on the Cash App for Gypsy Needs of Snacks. Hell yes, she's going to appreciate the fuck out of that also, let me tell you right now.
I'm telling you like it is, baby.
Love it, Pam. Thank you so much.
Give me the loot, give me the loot.
You know, I'm gonna give you some extra bells. There you go. Everybody getting extra bells. Extra bells. Extra bells. Thank you so much, Pammy. Appreciate that. We got a biscuit rocking. We got $10 in the pocket. Boom. Through the Cash App. That's what I'm talking about, baby. Out here, filling up, trying to give away a t-shirt. Everyone in here today, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Let's keep rolling. I'm going to go and check my biscuit.
Mr. Spector's jacket had blood spatter on it that was bigger than 0.1 of a millimeter in size, did it not?
There's a system to do it with the air fryer still.
And also, when Mr. Peck's in his article indicated that when you have a 38 special cartridge, because of the kinetic energy and the associated gases, it increases the number of blood spatter that is ejected from the spattering person or item.
It may. It doesn't necessarily. What you're doing is translating the energy of the gunshot wound to tissue damage and or creating spatter, and you can actually have a larger drop that goes a little bit farther, or you can have many more smaller drops, and the smaller the drop, the less distance it travels.
Did Mr. Peck in his article state the following? The 158 grain bullet from a 38 special cartridge develops approximately 60 foot-pound greater energy than a 40 grain bullet from a 22 long rifle cartridge. Our observations indicate that an increase in kinetic energy with the aid of associated gases will increase the number of droplets escaping from a bloody surface. Did he say that in his article?
Yes, he said that in his article. You just read it.
Right. He didn't say may, he said it will, correct?
That is an observation based on the laboratory study he was engaged in.
And in fact, he showed pictures of the sleeve of somebody who had actually
break down my system for my biscuit. So take it out of the package. It starts out with, first of all, you throw away the fucking cheese. You get that cheese out of here. That cheese is a big... no, we're not fucking with that. You put the biscuit, you separate everything. I like to stand everything up in an air fryer. I don't want to just kind of standing up on the side. Get your sausage in there, you get your egg in there, which they can lay down. And then you go 3 minutes. Then you take the biscuits out and you set them to the side, put them in a microwave, wrap them up, whatever. Flip the piece of sausage, flip the egg, 3 more minutes on those guys. Then you build your sandwich. You get the real cheese out of the fridge, build up your biscuit, then put it all together back in for 3 more minutes, and that is perfect. At least with these Jimmy John ones.
In a close contact wound in that article, right?
I have to pull the article out again. I believe you're correct.
And in fact, the distribution, the number, the proportionality of those veins on a right cuff of the shooter were different than what you saw on Mr. Spector's jacket, correct?
No, I wouldn't equate the two circumstances because one's a laboratory study and one is a case study.
And in the second article you discussed
I get
with Mr.
technical with the air
Jackson
fryer
on
stuff.
Redirect yesterday, you had read the Carger article that was pulled out and actually talked about it, and that's what I'd like to turn to now. You stated in the Carger article that was mostly laboratory studies also, correct?
No.
Right. Well, in the Carger article, is it true that Mr. Carger says in laboratory studies you have to be careful because even though gunshot spatter can travel approximately 4 feet, casework suggests it is greater when it comes out in a man or a human being?
He says that, but he also does not specify the size of the drop that he's talking about.
And in that article, did he also say, quote, in a recent suicide, we measured a back spatter traveling of 2 meters, that's 6 feet, after a frontal contact shot with
BG
a 22
knows.
high-velocity rimfire ammunition.
He says that, but again, what he's not specifying, that's a general statement. When there's backspatter, there is a variety of droplet sizes, and they actually, because they're different in
That's
size.
awesome. I had mine since like
and mass,
2017 or something.
will
It's probably
travel
older
different distances. What
Still
I'm
rocking.
talking about is the millimeter and smaller size, so that is a
Jimmy
non-specific
Dean,
statement
Jimmy
in that
Dean. If I
article
said Jimmy
that
Jones, I
is
didn't mean
not
to.
contradictory to what I've testified to.
And in fact, in a 22 high velocity, you understand the energy or the energy in a 38 is even
Morning,
greater,
Missy.
correct?
Rocking in here this morning,
No,
Missy.
not necessarily.
Do you understand that a rimfire cartridge doesn't exert as much pressure or power as a centerfire cartridge?
Once again, the pressure and the kind of weapon are not important in the consideration of in the sense that what is at the scene in a case study is what you have as the so-called static end result to evaluate. And it is what it is, regardless of the weapon that was used. I'm not going backwards and looking at the pattern and saying, here's a pattern, therefore you should go look for this kind of weapon. That's a different kind of reasoning.
And in the case studies that you've been involved with, none have involved intraoral wounds. You've testified to that already, correct?
No, that's not what I said.
And you also indicated that you could see cells under the
Free
microscope
this
at
woman.
the cellular level with your stereo
Rings the
microscope.
bell. Free
correct?
this woman.
And the stereo microscope goes up to what, 64 magnification?
Minus 63, yes.
63 magnification.
Yes.
Isn't it true that you cannot
There we go. Kathy coming through, and I like this. Meowder kitty. Meowder kitty coming through the church. Pumpkin wants her name on the will, and Pumpkin gets what Pumpkin wants, baby. I got you right now. Boom. Thank you so much, Kathy. Appreciate that. Boom. 420 through the Venmo machine. Let's go. Thank you very much. Not messing around again.
see whether something is a blood cell unless you magnify it 400
Building that
times?
thing up here.
No, that's not true. In fact, it's a classic teaching study to
Seven
take,
names. There we go.
If you take your
Five
fingernail
away.
and you put a drop of oil on the cuticle, in there you have what are called looped capillaries, and you can actually put your finger under the stereo microscope and see a capillary is only as big as an RBC, red blood cell. You can see the individual cells moving through.
That's when when a red blood cell is wet and not dried, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Isn't it true that on a dried blood cell, you cannot see cellular activity unless you magnify it 400 times?
I don't know what you mean by cellular activity. You can certainly see cellular and tissue morphology, which is structure, at that level.
And where, in your notes, by the way, you said that you actually, correct me if I'm wrong, that you pulled the thread on the alleged spatter you saw on the Mr. Spector's jacket on the right underarm here. Did you say you pulled the thread and looked at it under the microscope?
No.
Did you ever do a micro KM testing under the microscope of that?
Yes. I said I particle picked.
Where in your notes do you have that?
I'd have to go back through my notes.
We'll let you do that.
It'll take a while.
It could take days, but that's fine.
On my
3
page
days
number
later.
216.
Not hours, days.
Your Honor, may I approach to see what, so I can coordinate the base number with her?
Here's my
Right, okay.
Here's my blood standard. Here's my blank. Here's the reaction performed on filter paper under the stereoscope.
What was the date of that?
I'm feeling after this she's
June
going to be
5th,
free because this is such a long, short video.
And what stain did you pick?
I also don't know.
This particular notation is in reference
Linda's
to
had her claws in her for weeks now.
19D.
At this point.
And which is 19D on the jacket?
I'd have to go back through all the pictures. There's numbers on the arrows.
Do you have 19D set forth in your final
You
reports?
can tell that, yeah. Very contentious.
I don't understand that question.
But then again, they're probably getting a drink after this,
for
right?
19D, the stain 19D, do you have it set forth in
I
your
don't know.
report?
The vibe is a bit intense on there.
I don't understand
When you
what you're...
sub-identify
Oh, we're
the stain
going.
on
Oh, we're
the
doing
jacket,
it.
which is
Ladies and
19,
gentlemen, in this
you
corner.
put that in your report that 19D is the stain you tested.
Took her glasses off.
It's in my bench notes.
Okay. And there is no reference into your bench notes besides saying 19D as to which stain it is, correct? You don't diagram where that is.
No, it's recorded by photography.
And it's your testimony that 19D is a stain under the arm, right?
I don't know without going back. I visually identified all of the red arrows
Streaming today, Jessica?
that were placed. Some of
You got
them
a kick stream?
IKM tested. It's a presumptive test. The visual exam and identification I did.
Your stream's
is
on YouTube are so
actually,
early now. Jessica, I never do get in there.
in my realm of trace evidence,
Where I wake up, I
better than the KM testing. I'm not clear what you're asking
I'm
me.
asking, where in your notes do you identify specifically what stain 19D is?
It is based on me placing the arrows, and as I took the photo micrographs for those stains, the frame number from the 35 millimeter film was placed on the red arrow to record its location. So you have to go back to the photographs and read the number that appears on the red arrow.
Did you say yesterday, or attempt to infer yesterday, that you KM tested that stain underneath the right arm of Mr. Spector's jacket?
No, I did not. That, in fact, had a green arrow and was DNA typed by Steve Renteria.
And that's what I was asking you. So that you did never KM tested that stain?
I don't know if that was number 19 or not. I'll have to go back and research it.
Now, in fact, when you were doing the testing on Mr. Spector's jacket, you actually dropped the KM stopper bottle on it and created a stain, correct?
Yeah, I didn't drop the bottle on it. It's a little, it's a plastic bottle that has a cap that fits down in it. And
running here. Do my last
you take
round
that cap
of
out to refill it. And
biscuit making. I'll be right back.
What happened was sometimes with the when you squeeze it, that top pops off. So that did
Thanks everyone for
happen,
hanging out. Appreciate it, guys.
With the first reagent, it actually
Great morning in here.
was ethanol and water, and it did create a stain. I circled it in pen, initialed it, and had it photographed and indicated that that in fact happened.
Now, yesterday, at the very end of the day, Mr. Jackson asked you a hypothetical question concerning a possible white piece seen at the alleged scene by, hypothetically, a Sarah Kaplan. You remember that?
Yes.
Before we talk about that specifically, you indicated that you don't know whether it was of evidentiary value because you don't know what it was, correct?
Correct.
You don't know what the white piece lost in the bottom of the shoe was either, do you?
No.
And you don't know whether that was of evidentiary value in that it could have exculpated Mr. Spector, do you?
No.
You don't know what the white piece that was lost as Particle 10 was, do you?
I believe that that was adequately documented as part of the dentition before it was lost. It was photographed, and the odontologists had actually previously examined it, and as I understand it, the vial was subsequently broken after that examination.
You understand from the odontology report that Dr. Anselmo believed that the color did not match the other fragments of the crowns that were found at the scene. Don't you?
Dr. Anselmo believed that it was actually natural tooth enamel as opposed to the porcelain crown.
And in fact, all the other articles were sent to you to examine to see whether they were natural tooth or some other type of article, correct?
They were sent to me, but that was not why.
So in any event, you know the defense never had access to that Article 10 that was lost, correct?
Correct.
And you don't know whether that Article 10 would have been exculpatory to Mr. Spector, do you?
No.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Thank you. Redirect.
Just a couple of questions. With regard to the little item on the shoe, the white item on the shoe, and this goes back to Ms. Bodden's last couple of questions, you don't have any indication that anyone actively concealed that from you or the prosecution or the court, correct?
No, in fact, we actively researched where it could have gone, if anyone saw it. I looked at all the pictures. I know when it ceased to be on the side of the shoe.
And most likely, based on your examination of the shoe and the resin, if you will, the sticky substance on the back of the shoe, it appeared to be either part of the Band-Aid hanging over the shoe or part of the label hanging over the shoe, correct?
And it's well documented that we looked for it.
I'm sorry. And with regard to, I'm sorry, Diane, did you get that? Last? Sorry.
That we looked for it.
Thank you. Sorry. I apologize. And with regard to item 10, that item has been adequately photographed. As a matter of fact, it was studio photographed. The vial it was in was studio photographed. It was documented at the scene and the location of where it was recovered from at the scene, correct?
Yes.
And it was actually examined by a forensic odontologist, correct?
Yes.
And notes were made about that.
Yes.
And all of those notes and photographs and documentation have all been provided to the defense, correct?
To the best of my knowledge, it's recorded as such in my notes.
Welcome into Murder Church.
My notes.
And yet again, there's no indication that anybody actively concealed that item from you or the court or the prosecution, correct?
No.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Recross.
Didn't you just speculate
Oh my
as to
God.
what that piece of white particle was in the bottom of the shoe?
I wouldn't call it...
One more round.
I would say it's not speculation. I'm saying I, for a fact, don't know what it was.
And you don't know what could have been attached to it either, correct?
He asked me, could it be a Band-Aid or the Band-Aid or the label? The answer is yes, but I don't know that for a fact.
And you understand, in this court, we don't deal with possibilities, we deal with evidence.
Objection. This is argument.
Whoa, we're going, Lord.
I have nothing further to this.
Thank you. Subject to recall, you may step down. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Finally, where are we going next? Dear God, we've
Ladies and
literally
gentlemen,
been...
We're going to need to resolve
Judge
something
Dowhard,
outside your
take us out of here,
presence,
sir.
So if you will keep in mind the admonition to step into the jury room before we call the next witness. Thank you. You may step down.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Woo! We're going to move on down the road. Let's see where we're going next out of interest here. Outside, of course, the presence of the jury. Now we're going to fight for a fucking while. Only 13 minutes. Let's see what's up here. The judge and counsel discuss the testimony of Dr. Vincent DiMaio. All right. We're up to number 113, and I think ultimately there's like 230, so we've hit the halfway point, which is crazy that we've actually done that. Everyone in here, thank you all so much. Appreciate it. Again, PubliclyBuzzed is going to keep on rolling for a little bit here this morning. We'll see how the timing lands out, but I'm planning on going to about noon, 12:30. I got a biscuit getting ready to come out of the air fryer right now I'm excited about. And yeah, everyone that's donated this morning, thank you all so much. We're working on a will for a t-shirt. Again, I think, and I've been pushing this out there, that PubliclyBuzzed has the best merch in true crime. I try to make shirts that is anyone can wear it at any time, honestly, and not be embarrassed by it. So, hell yeah. Thank you all so much. Let's keep rocking and rolling. Down the road we go.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
There's an alternative left. Mr. Jackson, you
Here on
indicated you
Bicker
wanted
for a
a
while.
402 hearing concerning the next witness, I believe.
Yeah.
Or Mr. Dixon.
Mr. Dixon's going to
Okay.
address those issues.
A couple things. The first, probably the simplest, is that we would ask that during the defense case, during the defense experts that are testifying, that their other experts be excluded from the courtroom.
We agree with that.
Okay. That's
Secondly, as we've mentioned throughout this case a number of times, it's our belief, for the reasons that we've said before, that the defendant's statements should not come in before this jury, either directly or as part of an opinion evidence, and we would ask the court to, we'd ask the court to make that ruling and then indicate it to the
So Pokemon's got a
defense
sticker,
team and their
Murder Church sticker
witnesses.
rocking
And if
on the
court
automobile.
feels
I saw
way,
that.
We
Fucking
need
dope.
to, and I'll be happy to make a quick record, be rather specific with respect to Dr. DeMaio.
Nah, we're going to keep
And that
rolling
is
for a little while
because
here.
In a very recent case in Arizona, it's State versus Wade. I can give you the number if you'd like, but it's in the
There we
Superior
go.
Court
Kathy,
of Arizona
baby.
in Maricopa County before
Appreciate that,
Judge
Kathy.
Arthur Anderson just this
Buzzed
last
and
May of
confused. Kathy's showing
this
out this
year.
morning. I love it.
Dr. DeMaio was on the stand, and apparently
Getting
there was
that
the
shirt.
same type of order.
And
that
getting a lot of extra
statements
content
the
by being a
defendant were
fucking
not to be referred
member. Love it. Thank you so
to
much.
either directly
Best
or as
folks.
part of his opinion statements that he relied on.
Yeah, it's getting out there now.
And
It's getting out there.
Dr. DeMaio took the stand.
Thanks for coming back
and
in here.
immediately indicated
We're still
that
rolling
he had
now.
relied on
Also,
the
yeah, anytime we
defendant's
get a new member, beers,
statement, but didn't
probably
go any
nothings,
farther
liquor
than
drinks in
that.
the
And
chat,
if I
hell yes in
could
the chat.
Just read the court what
Maybe
that
Grog's in
court,
the chat.
Judge Anderson said. He asked when this happened, he asked the jurors to leave the courtroom. They did. And the court went on and said, Doctor, there's an order in this case that you cannot render any opinions based upon any statements you received from Lord and Wade. That was the defendant. Are you aware of that, Dr. DeMaio? Yes, Your Honor. The court, why did you mention that in reviewing Lord and Wade's statement in the litany of materials that you reviewed? Dr. DeMaio said, I did. The court said, you did. And then the court went on and said,
we have the nicest
just
people
before
here.
coming out here, I asked the defense whether or not this witness had understood the admonition, and the defense
I think I still got 5 to
had
give out
noted
this
that
morning,
they-
too, but I'm going to get my biscuit. I'll be
that
right
they
back.
were concerned about this statement. He went on to say, the court, I'm not particularly
Before
comfortable
I go,
that this was
Kelly Bobelli coming through the old Venmo machine with a 420. Nice. Will me, dill me. Hell yeah. Getting wheeled right up. Thank you so much, Kelly. Hell yeah.
just an oversight in light of the fact that there was a bright line that we drew
Giving away
here
a shirt,
for
baby.
counsel and for the witness. Dr. DeMaio went on and said, well, it just happened. I just read a list
3
of
names
and
away.
that's what
We're
I
trucking
did.
this
I didn't
morning.
realize
Hell yeah.
his name, the defendant's name.
It's been a while since we
was
had a
there.
full
I
will in one day.
didn't
I'll be
honestly
right back.
even realize his name was there. And then the court finally said, well, that's not good enough. You're an expert witness. You're an educated man. There's certain rules here that are court orders that are in place in order to avoid such problems. And they went on from there. I'm sorry to take the court's time to that extent, but we think that this is something that Dr. DeMaio should be, if the court agrees with our position, be personally admonished about not to cross that bright line if the court deems that there is such a bright line in this case.
Thank you. Defense?
Yeah, briefly, Your Honor. We're very cognizant of the court's previous in limine ruling, and it's our position that if we do intend to get into this area, I'm going to lay a foundation, but I would bring it up to the court before I broach the subject with the witness. This is the dilemma that we're in, is that Dr. DeMaio reviewed a lot of materials in this case, including statements of the driver, the defendant, etc. Some of those are in the coroner's office records and so forth. I don't believe he relies on any particular statements, whether it's the driver or anybody else, but he did review those materials. If the court wants us not to even mention the fact that he reviewed any of these records or one of these records, then if that's the order, that's the order. Dr. DeMaio is here, he'll abide by that. I think what happened in Arizona was he had a list of materials that he reviewed, and he just simply was reading from that, and that's what happened.
Well, actually, there'll be no need to approach me because the ruling I made previously on People versus Garderly, which is in 14 Cal 4th, I don't have the page number before me, remains in effect. The court has already made a finding, and that finding it was done for the purpose of cross-examination of witnesses that were on the stand, but it's going to carry forth that the court finds, although hearsay statements of a defendant or hearsay statements that are otherwise inadmissible of basically anybody can sometimes be considered by an expert in rendering an opinion, and then the jury is given an admonition. It is also very clear that assumes that the hearsay statements have reliability because of the nature of the statements in this case, because of what the surrounding facts are, that the court is making a finding under 352 that basically it is way too prejudicial to allow any statements by the defendant because they are not reliable. They are not going to come in unless he testifies first or testifies at some point, in which case the witnesses can then be recalled and can ask if that changes their opinions in any way or assists them. But there will be no reference whatsoever to any statements from the defendant by any expert witness. They are unreliable as a matter of law, and certainly in my opinion, under 352, they're not coming in, and each witness will be admonished appropriately that they are not to refer to any statements by Mr. Spector. If there's something in a report that's already been in or has nothing to do with this subject matter that you want to raise, that's something different. And you need to raise that. But any interview they've had with Mr. Spector or statements he's made that the people have chosen not to go into, and it's their decision whether those may be admitted into evidence, that they are to be admonished. They are not to refer to those statements, and if they do, the remedy is simple. That will end their testimony. Any testimony that they've already given will be stricken, and that's the end of it.
I understand the court's ruling. The only two exceptions to that, and I don't know that we'll even get into it, but I just want to make sure the record is clear, is that, and we do have these witnesses, in fact, we're going to try to call them this week. The two police officers, I believe they're Alhambra officers. One of them is when Mr. Spector motions them in initially, and the other one is when he says, go get my list of phone numbers in my jacket upstairs. In other words, I believe we referenced that with Dr. Pena. Other than that, I understand that what the court's ruling is that we go no further than those two. We've already broached those two. But again, I think that's what I don't think those are big issues with this witness or that. So. Just so that we're clear, I believe I tried to broach this subject with Dr. Pena. There are some statements in the coroner's records regarding Mr. Spector, and those are also off limits, or are they?
I don't know. I don't recall Dr. Pena's testimony.
I don't recall.
It went on for years.
But I do recall that there is in the investigative reports of the coroner's office and several other places, they talk about that there being conflicting statements. They don't get into they may get into the details, but they said there were conflicting statements as to Mr. Spector having the gun, etc.
Well, I don't know if you're going to have to pick those out and show them to me, and then I'll make a determination.
Yeah, my thought, or at least my request would be, if one of the defense experts says that he noted that there were just conflicting statements without getting into the details, is that something that we shouldn't touch upon either?
Yes, because that's inferential that there has been a statement by someone else conflicting. So we're staying away from the statements for the reasons stated.
Yeah, I think I did mention that with Dr. Pena. I can't remember whether that got objected to or what happened, but I think Mr. Rosen's
at this point, there's now an objection, and just because something was testified to at an earlier time, the repeated, that's open the door, isn't necessarily so, and case law has made that very clear.
Okay.
All right, we ready to proceed?
Great, I'm ready to proceed.
Let's bring out the jurors and the alternates.
Dr. DeMaio brought something up. He's very clear on the court's ruling.
I'm sorry, one more thing.
They've said nothing about a lot of other type of evidence. One of the things that Dr. DeMaio looked at, for example, is Ms. Clarkson's life story and so forth. He reviewed that, he reviewed all the computer information, the same thing Dr. Pena basically was given, etc. He did review that, and I think he considered that, and he feels very strong that that was an important part of his consideration of this case.
I'll hear from the people.
That's been, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I think the court made a ruling on the life story, if that's what the so-called diary, the life story that we weren't going into.
And that is correct. It's the same as the statement. That is so unreliable, and the court has made a finding specifically as to when, based upon the evidence, it ended. We still don't know. It's not a diary quote. It's a life story, and for those reasons, I've indicated it is unreliable, and the same holding under Garderly applies to that, and he is going to have, if that changes his opinion, you better talk to him outside the presence of the jury.
I'd like to have an evidentiary hearing with Dr. DeMaio on that at some point.
It really doesn't.
Yeah, diary and a life story are way different.
I have made a specific finding, and it's the exact same. It is unreliable. It should not come before the
Like
jury.
for a book?
I don't believe that a cautionary admonition
Compared to a journal or a diary
is
that you
adequate in this case. It's an attempt to
private.
prove as independent facts on the basis that an expert says, well, I relied on it. And
You
that's
don't
the
to
danger,
expect
and that's
to
the
be
danger
read,
that
whereas
Quarterly talks
a
about.
world book,
in allowing inadmissible
maybe you'll,
hearsay, it's one of the things the court has to
exaggerate
consider.
a little bit.
I've talked with Dr. DeMaio just briefly. He feels that as a medical examiner,
Maybe the story would be
forensic
better
pathologist,
if I said this.
State of mind type information and evidence should be all reviewed and considered. You should not just arbitrarily not consider it. And he feels that if he doesn't, and he actually did consider it, he feels it has certain value. In other words, to him as an expert, and he feels it would be malpractice for him not to have done that. And what detail we get into as to what he can talk about is one thing, but I would like him to explain that to the court as to why he considered it and what his take on it was. In other words, his reasons as a pathologist were for doing that.
You can make an offer of proof. The bottom line is whatever his responsibilities are as an expert or as a pathologist is fine, but it does not trump the court's ability to make sure that the jury has only admissible and appropriate evidence to consider. And that I am not going to allow the jury to consider inappropriate evidence that the people really don't have a chance to rebut, that is an attempt under the guise, in my mind, of attempting to put in inadmissible, independent proof, if you will, of the facts that the people can't challenge.
I would like, at least at some point, to have Dr. DeMaio, after he's been qualified as an expert, to explain that, just to have...
You can make an offer of proof at some later time. We're going to go forward with the jury at this point, because it's not coming in.
Okay, and is he to not mention that he reviewed your computer materials?
Yes, because the court has found them to be
unreliable. How about the emails?
The emails from another individual that have been backed up, that clearly, that he may consider. It is this diary or this life story that the court has kept out. Emails that clearly, because you can date them, they're clearly generated by her for the purpose of communicating with someone else. Yes, that he may refer to. It's a diary that's not coming in.
Well, I understand it's not going to come into evidence.
Yeah, I believe so.
He's not to mention it at all. Is that, I just want
That's
to
right.
Okay, I understand.
That's right.
Shit, Bonnie Bailey, thank you so much for the $2.
But in the emails and some of the things that are already into evidence, that her drug history.
Hell yeah.
And so
We get you on this thing, Bonnie. I'll finish off this biscuit
What
here.
email are you referring to? You're going to need to show me these exhibits that you plan on referring to that he relied upon to see if they've been discussed, if the court's made a ruling. I just don't want some generic email. You better show me what he's going to...
Segments. He's just going to talk about it.
No, give me the specific emails.
You know, fucked up now, dude. He wants to see it. Judge Dowhart's done with it.
Sure that it's not something
bullshitting endlessly, trying to get this damn thing going.
The ones that we're thinking of are ones
Son
that
of a
already
bitch.
marked and have been discussed with.
Show them to me.
Okay, I don't know their numbers right now, but we'll get to
You done fucked up. Now you done pissed him off. Now he wants to see him. Talking at your ass endlessly all the time. For fuck's sake.
Ladies and gentlemen,
hour 41.
people
That looks
are
like a
not
perfect
resting at this
for the
time
rest of
because
Murder
there is
Church.
the possibility, or there at the present time, there's some at least one or perhaps more witnesses that are present.
Before we get in here, we'll hear what what Judge Dowhart is saying. Dr. Vincent DiMaio, forensic pathologist, takes the stand, and we got a minute here with him, and yeah, a little testy in here.
Presently unavailable, and until we have resolved the issue of those witnesses being called, the people will not rest. But rather than just wait for that to be resolved, the defense is now going to move forward with its case, and at a later time, the people may reopen their case. So that's how we're moving forward. So at this point, does the defense have any witnesses they wish to call?
We certainly do, Your Honor. We would call Dr. Vincent DiMaio.
All right, step forward, please.
No? He's on a television show? Oh, the Netflix thing. No, I still have not watched that. I need to. I know. But in my defense, I really don't watch much at all, honestly. Pretty much just do this. But I need to. That would be awesome. I need to watch on Kick. With everybody, actually. I might do that on a Sunday sometime, or a Tuesday. That'd actually be pretty cool.
Vincent J.M. DiMaio, D-I-M-A-I-O.
Oh, shit, Sheila Duffy with a buck, baby. Let's go.
Dr. DiMaio,
thank you so much. We almost got this thing.
I'm a physician, a medical doctor, and at the present time I'm in private practice of the field of forensic pathology.
One away.
I want to go through your background education for the jury, and I want to start with your postgraduate training. I take it postgraduate from
thanks everyone.
High school and college. Did you receive any special education in the field of medicine?
We'll have a wheel spin on a murder church.
In 1965, I went to medical school. I went to
30 minutes of him explaining why he
Downstate
is
Medical
who he
Center in
is.
New York City.
Get his credentials.
I obtained my
why he's an
MD
expert.
degree 4 years later.
Like his
after graduating,
accent.
it was June of '65. I then did a year of training.
Settled in here. We got a movies link with this
anatomical
man.
Pathology at Duke Hospital in Durham, North Carolina, and 3 years of training in anatomical and clinical pathology at the Downstate Medical Center in New York City. I did a 5th year of training in the field of forensic pathology at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner for the state of Maryland. Following that, I took my specialty board exams in the fields of anatomical, clinical, and forensic pathology, and the exams are both written and practical. I think they ran over about 2 days, 2.5 days. It's been a long time. Took the exam, passed the exam, and became certified as a specialist in the 3 fields of anatomical, clinical, and forensic pathology.
I want to break this up a little bit and ask you some specific questions about these 3 subspecialties in the field of pathology.
Yeah.
Pathology is a specialty in the field of medicine, is it not?
Right. Pathology is the study and diagnosis of diseases. Pathology is the foundation of medicine. Without pathology, you have no diseases. Before the pathologist
I'm actually going to do it for Murder
appendicitis
Church.
was, found out
On Kick.
what heart disease was, found out what tuberculosis was, people said, well, they had this wasting disease or consumption, it was called, like tuberculosis. Or people would die of acute indigestion. It was a heart attack, but they got abdominal pain. And then the pathologist started studying, says, well, wait a minute, that's heart disease. And so it's a study and diagnosis of diseases.
Okay, and so the anatomical pathology deals with the areas of the body, I take it?
Well, the anatomical pathologist works in a hospital. And what he does is he examines tissue that is removed from the body. If you've ever been operated on and they took an organ out, if you've had a breast biopsy, if you've had skin tag removed, it goes to the pathologist. The pathologist then examines it under the microscope.
All right, I got a reminder over here. We're going to be doing that very soon, maybe even
this person
Tuesday.
has, and
we'll see.
Is it good or bad? And if it's like a cancer, how far it's spread. They then tell your doctor,
Mix it up a little bit, because I am intrigued in that. If I watch it with everybody else, that's even better.
So
we'll
if
all
you
get
have
a
a
piece of this.
diagnosis of cancer, it's actually not made by your surgeon, but it's made by the pathologist. The surgeon takes the tissue, gives it to the pathologist. He tells the surgeon tells you. And the only contact you have with the anatomical pathologist is when you get his bill. Then, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was about to go on to clinical pathology.
Yeah, go ahead. Why don't you go ahead and tell us what
Let's
the
keep on
clinical
rolling, sir.
pathology
You
is?
got
There's no
this.
difference.
Yeah, clinical pathologist works in the hospital. The clinical pathologist runs the labs. You had a throat culture, you had a...
It's Homicide Los Angeles exposes the dark side of the city. And episode 1 is Hunting Phil Spector. Yeah, we're going to watch that very soon.
blood test, a urine test.
Dave's been
have a
telling me about that
transfusion.
for literally
it's
ever.
all through the clinical pathology
Oh,
laboratory.
shit, Brooklyn.
The laboratory that is run by a clinical
Man,
pathologist.
morning.
And the third one I have is a forensic pathologist. Forensic pathologist, it's a field concerned with the application of all aspects of the medical sciences to the problems in the law. The forensic pathologist generally deals with dead people. He works in medical legal offices, either coroner's offices or medical examiner offices. And what he does is he makes determinations as to the cause and manner of death of people who die either violently, homicide, accident, suicide, something like that, or who die suddenly and
Oh,
unexpectedly.
shit. My bad, Pammy.
One of you keels over
thank you.
right now, you're a
I'm an
medical
idiot.
examiner case. And so you go there, and
Good
then
call.
he examines you. And then he makes a diagnosis of the cause of death, which is what killed you.
I'm an idiot.
And the manner of death, how it
We
came
killed it.
about. Is it accident or natural?
Here we go.
Suicide or homicide.
Oh, shit.
Okay. And the your board certified in all of these since the early 1970s, is that
Let's
correct?
see, the first two, 70, Forensic pathology, 71.
And after you became board certified in forensic pathology, did you have any military service in the field of pathology? And if so, what was that?
Right. After I finished my training, I then went into the Army. And I was in the Army for 2 years. I was a major. I was assigned to the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology in Washington, D.C., which is a tri-service, Army, Navy, Air Force service, or it was there. They're thinking of closing it now to save money. And what it did was all the pathology consultations, that's for the most part, reviews, went to this institute. And the first year I was charged of the medical legal section. The second year I was charged of the wound ballistics section.
Okay. When you say wound ballistics, what do you mean by that?
Essentially, shooting and blowing them up. And wounds due to firearms, wounds due to military weapons. I had custody of what was called the wound med study.
5 memberships here, folks. Let's see who gets them.
It's exactly wound, W-O-U-N-D-M-E-D.
Okay.
And
so who gets them?
Essentially, what that study was an attempt to evaluate.
So let's get some folks in here. Who's lurking back there? It's in the Murder Church and now members at Publicly Buzzed. Thank you so much. Amber, Aliyah, I'm butchering your name immediately, Amber, and I apologize. I'm going to say Aliyah. Amber Aliyah. I probably butchered that. I apologize. Susan Lund, Julie, Jane Summer, Jessica Love, all get in here. Let's go, new members. Boom.
Welcome to the party, pal.
Hanging, banging. Love it, love it, love it. Hell yeah. Welcome in here. Lots of cool stuff for members here at Publicly Buzzed. You're going to enjoy it. And welcome the hell in.
The effects of different weapons on people by examining the soldiers who were injured. Remember, this is during the Vietnam War. So we had all these people who were injured and some people who were autopsied. And so what they did was, most of them actually did
I always forget to give some of those away. I gave them all away this month.
They interview them and they'd get the medical records and they'd take photographs. I had 50,000 35 millimeter slides in my possession. And then it was put together in an attempt to have a research basis so that they would be able to evaluate the effects of different weapons.
Okay. Dr. DeMaio, after you worked with the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology and did the things that you did, I take it you had other positions in your career. Have you ever, you mentioned that you worked as a consultant in the field of forensic medicine and pathology. What do you generally do nowadays? In other words, what's your normal course of business?
Essentially what I do is consultations. People need the aid of a forensic pathologist, they call me up. Now, I don't advertise or anything like that. People get my name. If they want a forensic pathologist, they'll call me up. I'll listen to them. If the case is interesting, I'm retired now to a certain degree, so I choose. If I feel that I want to work the case, then I work the case.
Okay. Presently, do you have any position with reference to any type of medical journal?
Oh, yes. I'm the editor of the American Journal of Forensic Medicine and Pathology, which is the only forensic pathology journal published in the United States. And it's a peer-reviewed journal. If you're in forensic pathology and you want to publish a paper, it generally gets published in the journal that I'm the editor of.
He's the gatekeeper is what he's saying. You better be nice to me.
It's the journal that you're the editor-in-chief of.
You want to be something in this town, kid?
Everyone refers it as the Orange Journal, so you actually said what people call it, the Orange Journal.
And how long have you been the editor-in-chief?
1992. I think 1990. I forget now. It's been a while. Yeah, 1992.
And as the editor-in-chief, what do you do to edit this journal?
Essentially what happens is the people who want to publish an article, it's sent in to me. I then choose people to evaluate the article. The article goes to these people. They then evaluate it, write up a critique. their opinion as to whether it's good or not, or whether there are defects.
This is from 2007. From 1992 to 2007 is a shorter period of time from 2007 to 2024.
Then it comes back to me, and then I evaluate
time?
their
What is
evaluations, and I decide whether to print it or not.
Okay,
Miss
and
Mary,
this
welcome
journal,
in.
the American Journal of Forensic Medicine and
I know.
Pathology, you mentioned
Let's
it's
get
the
another one
only
up here.
forensic pathology journal in the United States. Is it relied upon by pathologists, forensic pathologists who do autopsies and determine cause and manner of death?
Yes, it's the official journal of the National
Dixie,
Association
morning.
of Medical Examiners. The National Association of
Morning.
Medical Examiners is an organization to which most forensic pathologists in the United States belong. And you pay your dues, and you also get the Orange Journal as well.
Dr. D'Amato, is it published outside of the United States? Is it, do people?
20% of our subscriptions are outside the United States as well.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the National Association of Medical Examiners. Do you have any positions with that organization?
Yes, I'm on the board of directors of it, and I'm also on two committees. One is the Strategic Planning Committee. That is, it's a committee that gets together and plans where the organization is going to go over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. The second committee I'm involved with has to do with the establishments of standards for the practice of forensic pathology. So, for you're doing autopsies, forensic autopsies, until October of 2005, there were no standards. You could do anything you wanted. And then in October 2005, this committee and finally got the National Association of Medical Examiners to adopt standards and what you should do in an autopsy, what types of autopsies you should do, how you should do them, how it should be documented.
Okay, can you tell the jury basically what type of an organization this National Association of Medical Examiners is? In other words, who belongs, what's its role in the forensic pathology community?
Essentially, it's organizations of physicians, all of whom are in the medical legal field. And virtually everybody who practices forensic pathology, virtually anybody who's in the field, belongs to the National Association of Medical Examiners.
Do they have scientific conferences?
Yes. We have in the fall, we'll have a full-blown conference that goes for a number of days. Usually it's in October. And then in February, when the American Academy of Forensic Sciences meets, which is a more general forensic thing, it's not just forensic pathology, meets, we have a half-day meeting at that. That's for continuity's sake.
Okay. The National Association of Medical Examiners, do you know whether or not the Los Angeles Medical Examiner Coroner's Office belongs to that, or any members?
Oh, yeah. It's accredited by the National Association of Medical Examiners.
Now, I want to move on to any prior positions that you may have had prior to your retirement. When did you retire?
I retired December the 31st of last year.
Okay. And what did you retire from? What position?
Okay, well, after I got out of the Army, I moved to Dallas, Texas.
Cheney.
That was in
Welcome in.
72. And from 72 to 81, I was a medical examiner in Dallas. And I started out as just a plain medical examiner, ended up as the deputy chief. And then in the end of 1980, I was offered the position of chief medical examiner for Bexar County, Texas. And in March 1st, 1981, I became chief medical examiner of Bexar County, which none of you have probably heard of with that name. What it is San Antonio. It's San Antonio and about 23 other communities, and the county population's about 1.5 billion people.
See if this guy's
Okay, and as the chief medical examiner, what were your duties?
Essentially to make sure that correct determinations and cause of manner of death are determined on all individuals dying violently or suddenly and unexpectedly in Bexar County, to perform autopsies when necessary.
This guy died September 18, 2022, so he still went on for quite a while.
To have autopsies performed by, other members of the staff who did it. When I retired, there were a total of 5 doctors on the staff and a total of maybe 40 employees, I think, something like that.
441.
Could you tell the jury, members of the jury, what the different functions are of a medical examiner's office, given the fact that you ran one for those years since 1981 till your retirement.
You're saying how it's organized and what it does, right?
Yeah, organized, what it does, like the different positions.
Right. Essentially, they're in a complete medical examiner system that is a fully functional type. You have 4 sections. One, you have the investigative section. And these are not physicians. These are lay investigators who you send out to the scene. You know, at one time, doctors would go to death scenes, but the problem is there's too many doctors. I mean, there's not too many doctors. There's too many dead and too few doctors. In the whole United States, there are maybe 500 full-time practicing forensic pathologists. And that's probably too high a number. It's probably less than that, somewhere between 400 and 500. And so what happens is you have an investigative section, and the investigators go to the scene, and they essentially talk to people, find out what happened, and take photographs, make diagrams, and prepare a report. And this report and photographs then go to the medical examiner. And this is the second division. You have investigators, then you have the medical division. The medical division, essentially, with the physicians, are the ones who do the autopsies, who examine the bodies, who draw fluids, who make conclusions as to the cause and manner of death. Now, you're not supposed to, contrary to what you see in TV, is touch the body until you get the investigative report.
Don't touch the body.
When you don't do autopsies blind, you have to know what's going on. So what will happen is the investigators will not only go to the scene, but they'll get medical records.
Forensic pathologist.
They'll talk to next of kin.
Welcome in
they'll
here.
get information, and they prepare
He just come up. He's still explaining his
telling you what's going
expertise.
on. So you don't go in blind.
Hope you had a good weekend.
And then you do the autopsy. And then, of course, you dictate them, and that goes to the clerical section. That's section 3, who prepare all the reports. And the last section is the toxicology section. And what happens is, at the time of autopsy, you'll take body fluids and drugs, not body fluids, tissue from the body, and submit it to what's called the toxicology laboratory, which is their chemists, and they analyze this material for the presence of alcohol and drugs. And then, in the end, the medical examiner puts it all together. The investigative report, the autopsy report, and the toxicology, and then makes their ultimate and final determination as to what killed the person and how it came about. Essentially, the medical examiner, and the way I've been describing it, works exactly like your own physician. When you go to a doctor, what you're taught in medical school, the way you diagnose diseases is history, physical, laboratory. You go to a doctor, and he asks you, what's wrong with you? I got a pain. Is it sharp? It's dull? Does it radiate? Does it go away with milk? That he takes your medical history. And then he does his physical. He prods you, listens to your chest, cough, open your mouth.
Don't prod me,
eyes,
sir. Don't threaten me with a
does
good
things
time.
like that. That's the physical. And then he says, well, I'm going to have to do some tests. And he gets blood and urine and maybe a culture from your throat. And then he submits it to a laboratory. And then based on the history you give, his physical exam, and the laboratory tests, which may include X-ray as well, he makes a decision as to what he thinks you have. He makes a diagnosis. The forensic pathologist does the same thing, and I just described it, but our patients don't talk to us. And so what happened is, our history is obtained from our investigators, and from the medical records, and from getting charts, from talking to people. And that's our history. And our physical is a little more thorough than you get. We do the autopsy, and then we do the tests. And the tests may just be toxicology, or maybe have the crime lab do examination of firearms or DNA and other. And then you put that all together, and independently of these other agencies, you make a ruling as to the cause and manner of death. And if you feel it's a homicide, you send a copy to the district attorney, and you tell them what your opinion is.
Thank you, Doctor. I wanted to ask you a couple of follow-up questions regarding your prior positions. In addition to being the chief medical examiner from 1981 to the time of your retirement last year,
one away on the wheel,
did you have any
Carolyn.
positions
Giving away
in
a
the
T-shirt.
education field where you taught students in the field of pathology?
Yes, I started out as an assistant professor in the University of Texas Health Science, I guess, organizations in Dallas, and I ended up as a professor in the end. So when I retired, at the end, I was a professor, part-time professor. And what happens is, if you go into pathology, say even if you want to go into hospital pathology, you want to do just hospital pathology, it's required by your training program that you spend approximately a month in a forensic pathology program to see what forensic pathologists do and to see disease. And so what untreated disease. And so what happens is they would send, there were in San Antonio, there were two pathology programs. One was the University of Texas Health Science Center, and the other one was run by the U.S. military, and it was combined Army Air Force type training. And so we would get the military doctors and the doctors from the university, and we would have them for a 1-month program to introduce them to forensic pathology, and hopefully to convert them and tell them they should go into our
young black
field
economist,
and not
welcome in here.
hospital pathology. And at the same, besides that, my office also had one of only about 45 programs that were allowed to train forensic pathologists.
Pretty good.
Suppose you do your hospital pathology, anatomical or clinical, and you want to do forensic pathology, you have to go to a program approved to train. And there's only about 45, and one of them was the one I was running in San Antonio.
Okay. So you would teach, in addition to doing the actual medical examiner's work, you would have physicians that were in training. Is that true?
Right.
Dr. DeMaio, did you ever work as a consultant for the Assassination Records Review Board in Washington, D.C.?
Dr. DeMaio's just always surprises.
That was concerned with the, I don't know if you call it declassification, the term. It had to do with the Kennedy assassination. And they had a bunch of evidence and x-rays and things like that. And before they permitted, quote, the public access to it, they wanted some forensic pathologists to go down and take a look at it. And I took a look at it. And, and they said, well, is there anything more we could do? I know it's 30, 40 years later, but is there anything more we can do with the evidence? And essentially we all said no. And so they declassified it.
Okay, you were appointed to that board, I take it?
Yeah, that was an official board. I was selected as one of the people to take a look at the stuff.
Okay. Dr. DeMaio, with reference to your work in the field of forensic pathology, did you ever have any position with the Journal of Forensic Sciences? In other words, any relationship with that particular journal?
Yes, I was on their board of editors for, I think, 20 years. 20 years. From 1980 to 2000, 20 years. I was on that board of editors.
Okay, and when you're on a board of editors for a journal that publishes, you have to review papers? And
right. That's where I said I sent them off to these people. And there I was one of the recipients who read it and then sent it off to the main editor.
Okay, so just so I can understand sort of the dynamics of this, if I were a doctor and I submitted a forensic pathology paper to the Journal of Forensic Sciences, you might be one of the people that would review it and then critique it and send it back to me for review. Is that correct?
Okay, no. Okay, let's get it. You write the paper, you send it to the editor-in-chief, who would then send it to me. I'd write my critique, and then send it back to him, and then he'd talk to you.
Okay. And you did that for a number of years, I take it?
20 years.
And were the types of papers that you reviewed for publication for the Journal of Forensic Sciences, were they in the field of forensic pathology?
Yes, they were forensic pathology articles.
Okay. Now, did you have any position with the College of American Pathologists?
I was on their editorial board as well. And I'm also on the editorial board of a journal called Legal Medicine, which is a Japanese journal, published in English, though.
Okay. Dr. DeMaio, as far as your profession, what type of professional organizations does a forensic pathologist belong to keep up with the developments in the field?
The most important is the National Association of Medical Examiners, and then there's, of secondary would be the American Academy of Forensic Sciences.
Okay. Now, I take it, Dr. DeMaio, that you were in reviewing, as the editor of the pathology journal that you mentioned, as a reviewer for the Journal of Forensic Sciences, did you ever have occasion to actually publish any articles or journal or books in the field of pathology?
Yes. You mean, have I written articles? Yes.
Written articles,
I've written articles.
Published them, written any books? Let's start with books. Have you ever published any books in your specialty field of pathology?
Essentially, yes. Okay, I've written 4 books. I wrote a book. My most recent book is called Excited Delirium Syndrome, and I'm the junior author in that book. The senior author is my wife, who is a nurse, who has a bachelor degree in nursing and also
So in 1981, Dr. Vincent DeMaio was involved in the examination of Lee Harvey Oswald's remains, which took place on October 4th, 1981. His involvement was not directly related to the assassination of JFK in '63, but rather in the context of identifying Oswald's body after exhuming. And however, his expertise in forensic pathology and gunshot wounds has often been referenced in discussions and when people talk about JFK and the assassination. Interesting. Yeah, I'd caught that when I did a quick little Google search of this dude. So interesting. I bet that's some interesting stuff to really dig into and find his opinion.
Letter in forensic nursing. I then have another book called Handbook of Forensic Pathology, which I wrote with one of my doctors, Dr. Dana. The third book is Forensic Pathology, which is a general textbook of forensic pathology. I wrote that with my late father,
he
who
thinks
was
the
chief
single
medical
bullet
examiner
theory
of New York City. And then the fourth book is Gunshot Wounds, which I wrote by myself.
Okay. This fourth book, Gunshot Wounds, is this book here that I'm holding up now, second edition?
Yes.
Okay. When did you write the first edition? When was the first edition of this book, if you can recall approximately?
That's interesting, too.
I think it was 85. It took me 11 years to write the first one.
Okay. And do you know whether this book is available to forensic pathologists in the United States?
He's not into any of the
It's
conspiracy
available
stuff.
to
He thinks that
anybody.
Oswald killed him.
Amazon.com. You can buy it if you're interested.
Do you know whether...
And the single bullet theory is going through Oswald's, not that there was just one bullet total, but that one bullet went through Oswald's neck and then went through, I think, even the seat and into the leg of Governor John Conley, who was in the front seat. And then, of course, the next shot blowing the head wide open of JFK.
Do you know whether it's published in other countries and other languages?
The first edition was published also in French. The second edition is also published in Spanish.
Now we still got one to go until we get a will.
That last book deals not with just the general field of forensic pathology, that specialty by itself, but gunshot wounds. How did you develop your interest in that subspecialty of gunshot wounds?
Somehow I developed an interest in firearms. And then when I went into forensic pathology, I started to get an interest in forensic pathology, I started to read the textbooks. And the textbook out when I went into forensic pathology was a book, I'm trying to remember the name of it. But it was there was the standard textbook of pathology. It was by Gonzalez, Vance, Halpern, and Umberger. And when I read the book on gunshot wounds, it didn't really make sense, some of their descriptions. And I realized that what happened was the first edition of the book came out in the 1930s from New York, and they were still using black powder cartridges rather than smokeless powder. So their descriptions were all screwed up because they weren't differentiating between them. And so that's when I started to get interested in gunshot wounds and started taking a look at that. Now, that was before Dr. Spitz's book was published. Spitz's book came out later. And so I said, there's something wrong, and I began to get an interest in it. And then when I trained in Baltimore, I was able to do a lot of experiments, which we can get in later, having to do with firearms. And then when I went into the military, I was put in the wound ballistics section, which had to do with firearms. And I was also able to do research, gelatin research, using both civilian and military weapons. And I
there we go. Sinead, game over. Boom.
Firearms research.
That's what I'm talking about. 250 coming through. Thank you very much. Boom. Let me get this wheel rocking. Thank you, Sinead. Appreciate that.
I guess the rest of my career.
Okay.
Just before you go on, ladies and gentlemen, does anybody on the jury need a break? No, had one. Anybody? Diana, how you doing? You okay? We're going to try to, because we're on a short schedule today, I want to try to get as much time as we can. So
very good, thank you. Dr. DeMaio, in addition to publishing the textbooks or the books that you just mentioned, particularly the book on gunshot wounds, have you published peer-reviewed articles in forensic journals over your career on the subject of gunshots or gun deaths?
Yes. I've published a total of 83 articles, 12 scientific letters, and 10 book chapters. And I would say, I don't know, a good quarter.
Good quarter?
A quarter to maybe a third of the articles and book chapters have to do with gunshot wounds.
Okay, I'm going to read one of them from your curriculum vitae just as an example, and this is cites a publication from the Journal of Forensic Science, Variations in Wounding Due to Unusual Firearms and Recently Available Ammunition. Is that the type of article that you might publish, something unique like that?
Right, I published that early in my career. I think, is Dr. Spitz a co-author on that?
I believe he is, at least according to that. And another one, firearms, wound ballistics that you published in the Journal of the Association of Firearm and Tool Marker Examiners. Is that?
Yeah, the journal, after Journal, Association of Firearm Tool Marker Examiners.
Okay. Now, have you ever, in your career, have you ever had any work that you've done for the Federal Bureau of Investigation?
Well, yes. Yes. Back in, I guess it was the 80s, the Federal Bureau of Investigation became dissatisfied with the weapons that their agents were carrying, which were predominantly .38 specials. And they decided to go over to semi-automatic pistols. And everyone does it. Not everyone carries semi-automatic pistols nowadays, but years ago, that was a big change. And so they formed this group, and I was part of it, and we acted as consultants to the FBI, and they wanted to decide whether to adopt a 9mm pistol or a .45 caliber pistol. And so we had the meeting. The group split down the middle.
We'll close the show up today with the wheel spin.
FBI adopted neither. They adopted the.
Thank you all so much.
What eventually became the 40 S&W. And there was another meeting having to do with that too. So, right, I was an advisor in their
Yo, more than defense attorney, meow.
Calibers and calibers of weapons.
Have you? Are you familiar with the FBI Law Enforcement Bulletin?
Yes.
We're going to be
Is it
here
a
for
publication by
this
the
entire
Federal
video,
Bureau
just
of
getting his
Investigation?
expertise.
And have you ever published any articles in that particular publication?
Yes, I have.
Have you published articles regarding the comparison of the wounding effects of commercially available handgun ammunition
quick
suitable
stand up
for
and a
police
stretch.
use?
Yes.
In this subspecialty that you
Still
have in the
listening,
field
huh?
of forensic pathology, do you ever deal with ammunition, types of guns?
I'd recommend doing that at the
wounds that are
house,
created
too.
by
Get
those
a quick
weapons?
stretch going.
Yes. Essentially, my area of interest is the difference in the wounding effects of different ammunitions and different weapons. And that's what my research was, and also research on basic facts having to do with the wounding capability of bullets, even the effects of powder on the body.
Okay,
Gunpowder.
When you say powder, is that like sooting or tattooing and things of that nature?
Essentially powder tattooing, marks on the skin produced by powder grains that strike the skin.
Okay. Dr. DeMaio, I want to move on to another area regarding your background. But before I do that, I wanted to ask you whether you've ever published any articles in other medical journals other than forensic journals. Let's say, for example, the New England Journal of Medicine.
Oh, yes.
Did it typically deal with forensic pathology issues that you would publish in that journal?
Right. Everything I would say, all but about 2 of my articles are on forensic pathology, so it's really simple.
Okay. The experience that you have in the field of forensic pathology, in addition to your work with these particular journals and you're writing these books and so forth, do you have experience in actually doing autopsies?
Oh, yes. I started doing forensic autopsies when I started training, and I did my last forensic autopsy in October of last year.
Okay.
I've done forensic autopsies for my whole career.
Stacy, thank you
And
so
when you
much. I'm
say
glad you made it
forensic
safely.
autopsy, that
Thanks for the
means
share.
Complete examination
Have a great Sunday.
through the investigative system that you were working for at the time?
Yes, essentially. It's everywhere I've been, they've had the same system. Investigators, medical section, clerical, toxicology.
Okay. Dr. DeMaio, with reference to the number of autopsies that you've ever done, can you give us just an estimate as to how many you've done in your career?
I've done about 9,000 and then supervised maybe 27, 30,000, something like that.
Damn. The ones that you supervise, this over 30,000, would those be for other doctors that were working under your direction?
Right, yes.
Okay, and could you explain to the members of the jury essentially what's involved in actually doing an autopsy? Sort of what's a competent medical examiner do when he's going to do a forensic autopsy?
Okay. First, you do an external examination of the body. And you don't want the body touched prior to you doing the external. So you look at the body, say if it's clothed, see what they're wearing, make a general description of how the body appears. You may collect trace
Later,
evidence
Dixie.
from
Thanks
the
for
body
hanging.
at that time. You then remove the clothing and re-examine the body unclothed. And you'll examine the clothing again. And if there are any injuries on the body, you want to see if there's corresponding defects or trauma to the clothing. You'll then clean the body to get a better, if it's covered with blood and such. You'll clean the body to get a better view of it. You'll examine the body then. You'll note down any other injuries or disease processes that you've missed when it was covered with, say, blood. Then you'll go on to the internal examination. You examine the internal organs as they lie in the body. You'll take body fluids at this time, such as blood, urine, vitreous, which is the fluid from the eye. Then you remove the internal organs, dissect them, And if necessary, and you'll take pieces of tissue from each organ and retain them, and if necessary, you'll make microscopic slides from these tissues. And that is the physical part of the autopsy. But when forensic pathologist refers to an autopsy, they also mean you take into account the investigation and the toxicology. But the physical part of the autopsy, the mechanical thing, is what I've just described.
Okay. And part of doing an autopsy, does it involve you learning about the scene where the death occurred?
Yes.
And how do you do that, and what type of information do you want to learn regarding the scene?
You can go to the scene and visit it yourself, or in some areas you have your investigators do it, and you look at the photographs. It's very easy now with digital cameras because you can see everything immediately. And so what you're looking at the scene for is for factors or evidence or alterations that might have an effect on how you're going to rule the cause of death and how you are going to deduce how the injuries occurred. You know, what was the position of the person, if you can tell. Things like that. You know, is there any objects around that may have been associated with the body that there may be trauma?
We're back.
Okay. So you try to learn as much as you can about the scene, the death scene, is that correct?
Right. You're taking a history. You're just like you're asking a member of the jury what's wrong with them. You're getting a history. You're going back. It's like you get the old medical records. You get what's there. And that's what you want to see.
Okay. How about crime laboratory reports that get generated as a result of criminal investigations or things of that nature?
Right. You obtain the crime laboratory reports, and, it depends on the cases. I mean, some cases are really simple, and some cases, you don't need crime lab report if somebody dies of a heart attack or certain things. It depends. And then what you have to do, but if it's a difficult case, you then integrate everything you have. The scene, the autopsy, and the laboratory results. And then you put that together and you issue your conclusion.
Okay. And essentially you ultimately issue a death certificate. Is that the ultimate end of the investigation?
In a way. What you do is you complete the autopsy report, and often the death certificate is issued before it's complete, and then you're finished with the case. However, no case is ever finished. If somebody comes to you 5 or 6 years later down the line, you may reopen it. We've done that occasionally.
Okay. Dr. DeMaio, I want to get into another area of your background and experience. And you mentioned that you've done personally over 9,000 autopsies, supervised a number of other ones. Have you ever done autopsies where you've concluded somebody died of a self-destruction or as a result of suicide?
Suicide? Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Define what that term is, first of all, and then...
Well, you're talking self-inflicted injuries?
Self-inflicted?
Self-inflicted injuries, the doctors would classify it as suicide.
Okay. And when you personally, how many suicides approximately have you evaluated over the course of your career, both the ones that you've done, also the ones that you've supervised in your office?
Oh, okay. Well, if you just think of my office, where I was chief for 25 years, and then you multiply 25 years by, say, 1,000, that's 20, it's about 30, well, it's add a little more, that's about 30,000 autopsies, of which suicides, there'd have to be 5,000, 6,000, something like that.
In your expertise in your field of publishing in the area of forensic pathology, have you ever authored any articles on the subject of suicide?
There's a chapter in the my gunshot wound book, and there's sections on it in the forensic path book and in the handbook as well.
Okay, and do medical examiners, do they keep track of statistical information and other details regarding suicides for the benefit of forensic pathologists?
Most offices don't. I was real hyper about it, so I kept the statistics. But most offices don't, because they don't have the resources to do it.
Okay. Have you ever published anything in the field of suicide, any journal articles or anything such as that?
I know there's chapters. I don't know if there's anything in my my articles. I've forgotten now, honestly. You know, after a while it gets away from you.
Okay.
You publish so many of these, you know.
Dr. DeMaio,
I've been doing this for
to
quite
your work
some
as a
time.
consultant, have you done that for how long?
I've been doing consultations on a regular basis probably since 1981, 1982.
Okay, would these be consultations for cases
This is my
outside of
life.
where you were working in
It's
San
my
Antonio?
life.
Right.
It's
in
me.
my county, the medical
It is what it is.
examiners are allowed to do private work.
Okay, and
everything is on the side.
this case is a consultant
Yes,
position?
of course, I'm not employed by that county anymore, but this is an outside consultation, yes.
Okay, and you started this, how long have you been consulting on this case?
About 81, 82.
You've been doing consulting. How about on this case itself?
Oh, this case, I was approached a year ago this past February, so year and 4 months, 5 months, something like that.
Okay. What other type of people do you consult with, or agencies, if you could kind of give us a general idea as to what you do?
Well, a couple of months ago, I was here in Los Angeles testifying in court for the city of Los Angeles and the Los Angeles Police Department, who were being sued. And I was a witness defending the police department and the city, and won, so the taxpayers aren't going to have to pay any money on that case.
No.
I've got, let's see, I've got another civil case for, which is interesting. It's city and police department in Alhambra, which is involved in this one. Last 2 years, I did a homicide trial in Napa Valley, where a man had killed his wife 10 years before, and they finally were trying him. Testified to the district attorney in that one. Done 2 cases down in San Diego. One was a doctor, actually came from my medical school, graduated a year or 2 before me, who strangled his wife. Testified for the district attorney there. Then I testified for the district attorney in San Diego on a second case, a man who killed his wife in '73 and then killed another wife in 2005. Did a homicide case for the district attorney's office in Riverside. And a number of years ago, I did 2 homicides for the district attorney's office here in L.A.
Okay, so you would be basically retained as a consultant and evaluate the cases and then, if necessary, testify. Is that correct?
Right, yeah.
Both civil and criminal cases?
Yes, yeah.
Do you charge for your consultation work?
Yes.
You charge for your services in this case, the Spector case?
Yes, at the same rate I charge the city of L.A. and charging the Alhambra, the law firm that's representing the city of Alhambra.
Okay. I want to now move on to sort of your specialty in the field of forensic pathology and ask you some additional questions about your expertise regarding gunshot wounds and gunshot deaths. Have you ever, in the course of your career, done any type of experimentation as it relates to gunshot wounds and wounds, and deaths by guns?
Yes.
Could you tell the jury in general what your experience is?
When I was in Baltimore, the medical examiner's office had an arrangement with the state. In Maryland, unclaimed bodies are referred to the medical schools for anatomical purposes. So there was the board of anatomy in the state. And they had lots of bodies, and they let the medical examiner's office do experiments. And so when I was there, I did a number of experiments on the bodies with the permission of the anatomical board. Essentially, these involved shooting people in the head. And then I also did shots into the trunk, in other areas, both standard ammunition, blank ammunition where there was no bullets, and at that time, the new high-velocity hollow point ammunition, which had just come out on the market. When I was in Dallas, since we had affiliation with the medical schools, I obtained, again, medical specimens, well, donated portions of bodies, and I did research there on perforation of the skin by bullets. What was the velocity for a bullet needed to get through skin? I also, at that same time, did experiments on powder tattooing in animals. You have to do experiments in tattooing, your subject has to be alive, and you can't shoot people. So you have to, if you want to do experiments on tattooing, you have to shoot animals. So did that through the auspices of the medical school there. And then I did gelatin studies. You know, the effect where you fire bullets into gelatin.
I know this is odd, but I taught people how to make jello.
And I did it also when I was in Dallas.
Okay. Dr. DeMaio, is there any difference in, or does it make a difference if somebody gets shot with a different caliber weapon? In other words, is that a variable that makes a difference as to something that you might be looking at in cause and manner of death?
Yes. In fact, that was the whole thing with the FBI, that the caliber they had, they weren't happy with. Essentially, the more kinetic energy, the energy of work that a bullet possesses, the severer the wound it can produce. Thus, a .22 caliber bullet, which is, you know, like 34, 36 grains, can do a certain amount of injury. But at the other extreme, you get a .45 caliber, you know, Full Metal Jacket, 230 grains. That's going to produce more injuries. And it's not only just the size, but it's the velocity. So if I take a .22 caliber bullet and fire it at 1,000 feet per second, it'll produce X amount of injury. If I then take it and put it in another cartridge and fire it at 2,000, it has more energy. And the more energy it has means it will go farther and it'll produce a severer wound. So the more energy a missile or a bullet possesses, the severer the wound, because it will lose more energy, give up more energy to the body, and increase the severity of a wound, which is why police officers are carrying 9mm or 40s, and they're not carrying 22s, because the 9s and 40s are much more superior than a 22.
Welcome back in, Karen B. I love it. Yeah, I remember you.
More stopping ability. It has more kinetic energy, the energy of work, which is determined by the weight of the bullet.
I get it. Life.
And the velocity.
Life happens.
Okay. How did you learn so much about guns in your field? What was
Glad you're back in here.
How did you begin?
Well, you know, you study
We still out here,
in the
baby.
military was easy because you could do the experiments. You had access to weapons, and you had access to research that the military had done on firearms, which is all unclassified now. And so the area of wound ballistics is a whole study that started in the early 20th century, and it's why the military has certain weapons now and has discarded other weapons, because the research on wounding is now scientific. It's not, well, I kind of like this because I think this will do it. This, no. You've got to do the tests, and we will scientifically determine how effective a bullet is.
I want to ask you some questions about weapons and some general questions. If we could have Exhibit QQ, Defense Exhibit QQ, put up first of all, and I'm going to show this. The jury's, I think, previously seen it with Dr. Pena's testimony, and ask you to take a look at this, Dr. DeMaio.
Yes.
Do you see this particular photograph? If we could have just the gun enlarged with the cloud, could you basically tell the jury what they're seeing in this particular photograph?
Okay, this is a revolver. The cartridge is in the cylinder. And this one, this is Smith & Wesson. Okay. There are 6 cartridges in this cylinder. And they rotate. Now what's happened is this cylinder is in line with the barrel. The hammer has struck the firing pin. The primer discharged. It ignited the powder. The powder is burning. And you can see the flame coming out this what's called the cylinder gap. That is, the bullet lies here, and then when you fire it, it jumps from the cylinder into the barrel, then goes down the barrel, and then exits. And so what's happened is the bullet has jumped. There's the flame. There's soot, powder, gunshot residue, all coming out of this gap, the cylinder gap.
Okay.
And if you put your hand, and don't do this, next to a cylinder gap, and you fire the gun, what you're going to do is you're going to get soot, you're going to get powder, you're going to get maybe fragments of metal, and you're going to get a burn. If you're lucky, if you're unlucky, it's going to rip your skin open, because this gas is coming out under, 6,000, 7,000 pounds per square inch pressure.
Okay.
Then the bullet has gone down here, and what you're looking at is, well, right over here is a flame. And this flame is about 1,400 degrees centigrade. And anything in front of it will be burnt, or if it's plastic, it will melt. And this is then you have this gas cloud, which is going to be about 1 foot in diameter. And it kind of has a mushroom shape. Some of the gas actually gets out before the bullet. It goes in front of it somehow. And then you can see it here, and you can see the gas cloud, and some of this gas is ignited and is now burning. And you have this cloud of gas here, and there's some unburnt grains of powder, there's gunshot residue in there, there's soot, everything from the bullet is in there. And it's emerging here. Now this is I don't know what it is, how much, but it's emerging under a few thousand pounds per square inch. That's the pressure. This gas, when it comes out of here, is a couple of 1,000 pounds per square inch. Depends on the caliber, depends on the barrel length. The longer the barrel length, the lower the pressure.
Okay, so depending upon, what are the variables for the pressure that comes out of the barrel once the bullet is fired?
Well, the variables are before. That is, the cartridge. A 38 is going to have more pressure than a 22. There's going to be more gas coming out, more unburnt powder, more soot, more material. And all coming out. So this will be bigger with a 38 than a 22 with a lot more pressure.
Okay. Now, keeping this exhibit QQ on there for a minute, does it make a difference the type of ammunition that's used?
Yeah. If you're talking like something like 38?
Like a 38 ammunition. There's been some talk of P ammunition, plus P. What are the differences in those?
When you manufacture a gun, it has to be built to certain specifications. Don't forget, that cartridge is not quite. Essentially what you've got is a controlled explosion in the chamber. That's what a discharge is, okay? So the gun has to be built that it can stand a certain amount of pressure. And this pressure is determined by an association of manufacturers. Now, there is a standard pressure for all 38 caliber cartridges. Well, what happened is people wanted a more effective 38 cartridge. So they began to load it to higher and higher pressures. And what they did was, this ammunition would work in new guns, but they're saying, you know, I wouldn't really be using it in guns made in the 1930s or 1940s because we can't guarantee the steel. And I wouldn't be using it in light frame aluminum guns too much. Yeah, use a couple of rounds because it's going to beat up the frame, okay? And so because of that, the ammunition is marked plus P, and that means it's increased pressure. And actually, for a while, and I haven't seen it recently, they had plus P plus. And essentially, that was the equivalent of firing .357 ammunition in a .38 revolver. And, you know, you just better make sure that your gun was pretty good before you did it, and you didn't put too many rounds through it. But a plus P is higher pressure.
Okay, and the barrel length would make that there would be a variable to the amount of pressure that comes out of a gun.
Right. The longer the barrel, the more the space and volume for the pressure to disperse.
Okay, so the shorter the barrel, when it comes out, it's a greater pressure.
It's a higher pressure.
Okay. Now, you've fired guns, I take it, a number of times?
Yes.
You're familiar with all different types of weapons based upon your research and that you've actually fired?
Yes.
Let me ask you whether or not you're familiar with a Colt 38 caliber 2-inch revolver.
Sure.
Okay, the revolver that's in this case, that you learned was in this case, how are you familiar with that weapon?
Oh, this is a Colt Cobra.
Colt Cobra.
Yeah, I bought one in mid to late 1960s. I sold it to an osteopathic physician in the mid 1970s.
Okay, so you fired that weapon.
That was a lot of information.
That's the ammunition.
Let's see. Back in those days, we really didn't have plus P around then, or if it was just coming out. Just fairly standard ammunition.
Okay. With reference to a gun, I'm going to show you a picture that we don't have marked as an exhibit, but we'd asked that it be marked next in order, Your Honor. It's the same gun here, but this is a high-speed photograph, I take it. Is that correct?
Actually, it's not. What it is it's someone's darkened the room, taken the camera, opened up the shutter, fired the gun, closed the shutter, and turned the lights on.
Okay.
Everything is just a gun illuminating itself.
Okay. If we could have the next one marked next in order.
I believe we have reached septuple A. Septuple.
SCP?
My God.
And then we have octuple, and then non-uple, and then decuple, and then I upchuckle if we get that. Because I don't know what the next one is.
Okay.
It just keeps going on and on, my friends. I'm fixing the fajitas that just keep coming through. This trial will be going on forever now. It is the trial that never ends. It just keeps going on and on, my friends.
Hey, motherfucker.
We've tried, we're not sure.
Okay, well, maybe we won't get there, Your Honor.
All right.
This is a septuple A, 7 A's. If you could tell us what's shown in this particular photograph.
Up-tuckle. I'm Googling.
What's
Is that a
happened
word?
here
Did I
is
get
the
it?
bullet now is long gone. The gun has
Up-tuckle.
recoiled. Now, you see this thing right here?
Yeah, that flame?
The flame.
I did not get
That's
it right. It's
where
also slang for a boner.
barrel
What the
was.
fuck?
And this
Tucking
was where the
of an
cylinder
erection?
was.
What
the
the
gun
fuck?
has gone up and it's gone back. So it's recoiled
Oh.
up. Let's see.
I think I
I'm
misheard
losing
that.
focus. Whoops. Oh. So this was right there. This was there, pointing straight ahead.
Up, chuckle.
And it's recoiled up.
Okay.
You can see the extent of the gas cloud just from the muzzle. This is the muzzle, and then this is coming out the cylinder gap. You can see how it tends to fold back onto the hand of the firearm. And this residue coming out can go back, 5 meters as such. Sideways, coming out here, go out about 15 feet is 5 meters. 30 feet, the side.
Okay, this stuff that comes out, gunshot residue, gas cloud, whatever. What is that? If you could tell the jury what's in all of that material that they refer to as gunshot residue.
Okay. The thing that comes out the cylinder is exactly the thing that comes out the muzzle except the bullet. The bullet comes out the muzzle.
This week on Murder Church, boner slaying.
Here's what you'll get. First, you'll get unburnt grains of powder that will come out. Most will come out the muzzle. A few will come out the cylinder. Actually, it's hard. Could you tighten up right over here?
That's what she said.
No, I guess it's not. But anyway, you can see where this went here and this went there. But sometimes you can actually see the grains of powder. The grains of powder will come out the gap. Then you'll get soot, carbon. All that gunpowder is nitrocellulose. It's kind of like, you remember, it's right. You know, like 35 millimeter film? 35 millimeter film is cellulose, nitrocellulose, okay? I don't know if it's nitro anymore, but anyway, the old film, that's why old film storage, you have to process the old films because they were made out of nitrocellulose. And they were very explosive and flammable. Okay, so what happens is the nitrocellulose or the gunpowder burns, it turns into soot. And so out the gap, you're getting the powder that's been turned into soot, which is carbon. You're getting the gas from the burning of the nitrocellulose. And it can be very hot, it's very hot. And you may get a little pieces of the bullet if the bullet, when it makes its jump, doesn't make a perfect jump. And you're also getting what's called gunshot residue. And by that I mean is primer compounds. Gunshot residue consists of little spheres to oval-shaped deposits, condensations of evaporated metal. And the unique particles contain antimony, barium, and lead. So the gunshot residue particles are also coming out that gap, and they're going out also the muzzle.
In your books that you publish on in the field of gunshot wounds and deaths as a result of gunshots, do you deal with gunshot residue?
Yes, because my laboratory did gunshot residue tests. We did originally tests by flameless atomic absorption. Then we went on to what's being done in this case, scanning electron microscope. But SEM is not really of interest to most forensic pathologists. It's very expensive, and you can get the same information with the method that we had been using before, which is much, much, much cheaper. So so when I left, we were back to the older method.
Okay, Dr. DeMaio, why are forensic pathologists? Why are they interested in gunshot residue? What's the interest?
Basically, because people think that the most difficult cases for forensic pathologists are homicide. That's not true. It's suicide. And the reason is people do not want to accept suicide. So they'll try to make suicides into homicides.
Right.
And so what we're looking for is methods to demonstrate that the person actually held the gun in their hand and they fired the weapon and such. And that's why we're after the gunshot residue, because it helps to support our conclusion that it's a suicide. It's a supportive measure and such, and it's a confirmatory measure.
Okay. So when we talk about gunshot residue, we're talking about soot, and we're talking about all of these items that are within that?
When we say gunshot residue, that has a very specific meaning. That means primer and bullet material, and that means metallic, the condensation of metallic elements in the primer and to a lesser degree in the bullet. It's not powder, it's not soot. This is very specific. Soot, there's no difference between the soot of burning powder and you burning a match. But the metallic gunshot residue are, if you pick the right ones, the antimony, barium, and lead ones, they are specific for gunshot residue, and they are not produced by anything else. And that's why you want to analyze for those.
Okay. And tell the jury, essentially, as a medical examiner, when you're doing an investigation in the field of forensic pathology, what do you want to do as far as a gunshot residue evaluation, if that's an issue? If that's an important part of the evaluation.
Okay, essentially what we want to do is find out the distribution of.
I mean, there are reasons to question if she did this to herself
with
with some of the stuff that they brought forward.
We'll collect material from the
Super
back
interesting.
of, say, the right hand, the palm of
Then
the
you get the
right
history of
hand,
what Phil
the
has
back of the
done.
left hand, the palm of the left hand, and then you always have a control. And
And
what
the way
we're
this
looking
freaking trial
for
ended, man?
is a distribution of the gunshot residue, so that if you have your hand around a gun, think about it, and then you fire it, where do you expect the gunshot residue? On the back of the hand, not on the palm, because the palm is protected. And so you're looking for this distribution of gunshot residue on the hands. And in about 40% of the cases, you can demonstrate a distribution pattern, and that will make it either consistent, they'll make it consistent with the person having discharged a gun.
Okay. When you say discharged a gun, is there a certain kind of threshold amount of gunshot residue that you need to see before you can come to that conclusion?
Okay, well, we're talking about different things.
Okay.
Okay. What we're looking for is more of a distribution. And that's why using elemental compounds like, instead of going, that's why forensic pathologists don't like SEM too much. Because SEM you can only semi-quantitate. That this analysis done in this case is by what's called SEM, scanning electron microscopy. And the problem is you get the disc, and then you have to, if you really want to do a good job, you have to scan the whole disk. And that takes about 6 to 8 hours, but it's all automated. And so what you can then do is count the number of particles on each disk and then see what your ratio is. And you're looking for a ratio between, say, like the back of the hand and the palm, if you can think they fired it this way. And the other method, if you just analyze for antimony, barium, and lead, you get specific quantities rather than, so you don't end up with ratios. You're looking for a ratio, a significant ratio. Once you get to like 5 to 1, then you know you're getting into the area where you can start saying, my opinion, this is consistent with the person firing a gun by determining the ratio.
Okay. So you have these specific particles that you're looking for in this testing, is that
Right.
correct? If somebody just has, for example, one particle that's specific to gunshots, is that a positive test?
It's a positive test to a laboratory, but it's absolutely, totally worthless to a forensic pathologist. And here's the reason. Suppose I fired a gun right now in this room. Out comes the gunshot residue. And most of it settles. The rest floats in the air. If I fired it this way, and then the jury said, oh, we better get out of here, and they walked around past here, just by walking through there, they might get one or two particles. So one doesn't mean much. And on the top of it, if you touch a gun, or you shake hands with a police officer, or if a police officer handcuffs you, they're touching their guns all the time. And if there's a gun, a GSR particle on it, they can just transfer it by touching it. Or the other place they found gunshot residue particles is in the back of police cars. They handcuff people, put them in the back of police cars, and they come out, you check, their hands were negative before they did this experiments. They go in, there's nothing on their hands, they come out, they got a gunshot residue. So one doesn't mean much for a forensic pathologist's interpretation, because it's so easy to acquire it if you get anywhere near where a gun's been fired or anywhere near a police officer.
Okay, so what would be the difference if somebody just had one specific particle and maybe non-specific particle on two hands versus somebody that had an abundant amount?
The person who has abundant particles is most consistent with having fired the gun, not one particle. One particle for a forensic pathologist is meaningless.
Dr. DeMaio, when you look at gunshot residue, these particles and so forth, if you've explained to the jury, do you ever look at things other than the hands, let's say the sleeves of the clothing or things of that nature?
You can do that. Most crime labs actually don't do that, but it's actually a very good method, because if you fire a weapon, if you get gunshot residue on the back of the hands, you should get it on your cuffs as well. And I'm talking about the specific particles, and you should get them on that. And I've seen the Chicago Police Department do it occasionally in cases, but most crime labs for some reason don't do it.
Dr. DeMaio, I want to start to focus in a little bit more on this specific particular case that you're involved in here in court today, and ask you to define the term intraoral gunshot wound. If you could explain what that term means to the members of the jury.
An intraoral gunshot wound means the muzzle of the gun, the barrel, is inside the mouth.
Okay, and when it comes to that type of gunshot wound, how is it different than a gunshot wound that's not in that particular location when the gun is fired?
Well, by definition, it's just not that location. Your question is a little vague.
Okay, let me get more specific. When somebody is shot, do forensic pathologists that are knowledgeable about gunshot wounds, do they ever look at the tissues, blood, body tissues that get disrupted during the gunshot event?
Oh, sure.
Okay, what's that called?
It's called examination of the gunshot wound.
Okay.
And what we'll do is, it depends. It's, okay, suppose you've got a gunshot wound. By the standards, now in adoption, you have to locate the wound as to where it is. And then you're supposed to do a detailed description of the size, whether there's soot present, whether there's powder present. Then you have to take a photograph to document it, and then you should have to show the trajectory of the bullet through the body, the injuries produced, and what the bullet is like when you recover it.
Okay. Do you ever look at the tissues that get ejected from the body?
Oh, yes.
And what's that called, the ejected tissues?
You're talking about blood spatter.
Okay.
Or tissue spatter.
When somebody gets shot and there's both an entrance wound and an exit wound, do tissues, blood and tissue, get ejected from both wounds?
Yes. What happens is, depending on, okay, if the gun is in contact with the body, when you fire the gun, that gas cloud you saw accompanies the bullet into the body. Now, in the case of a .38 revolver, that gas is under about, with a 2-inch barrel, 5,080 pounds per square inch when that gas comes out. So the bullet punches a hole, and injected through the skin into the tissue is gas under 5,000 pounds per square inch pressure. And it tries to follow the bullet through the body. And sometimes it does to a degree, and sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the area. If it's in the chest, all that gas will go into your chest cavity, and all of a sudden your chest cavity will expand. It's the same thing if it's in the abdomen. Now, suppose you do it to your temple. It doesn't happen that way. The skin makes, the bullet makes a hole through the skin, through the bone, and that gas tries to follow it through. Well, it can't, because you've got that little hole, and you have no skin, and so the gas kind of dissects out and spreads out between the skin and bone, and that whole skin flares out. And in most instances, when it flares out, and you're dealing with something like 38 and above, the skin tears. And so instead of getting like a 38 caliber, 38, by the way, produces a 9mm hole. And if you don't mind me talking in metric, it's easier this way. Okay, we'll stick with inches anyway. Okay, 38 produces about a 0.35 inch hole. And in the skin, and then it produces in the bone, but that gas spreads, and then from that hole, tears radiate out, 1, 2, 3 inches. So you get a wound that's maybe 3 by 4 inches in the skull, because that gas can't follow the bullet through. And what happens is, when it flares out, it ejects tissue, throws tissue and blood away from the body. It imparts to this tissue kinetic energy. It imparts to the tissue velocity, and it gets flung out. And the gas, which is turbulent, flings it out at different angles. Now, if you put the gun in the mouth and then you fire it, you get the gas cloud that you saw up there. And this gas cloud, which comes out at 5,000 pounds per square inch, it's like dropping an SUV in your mouth, comes out and begins to expand, just like all gases expand.
Dropping
Only
an
it's
SUV
expanding in your mouth, which isn't very big, and then it rushes up the back of your mouth around your palate, down into your nasal cavity, and then it comes out your nose. So this gas now wants to escape. And where can it escape? It escapes from the nose and escapes from the mouth. Now that bullet has gone in, and that bullet has hit tissue, hit bone, shredded it. The pressure is also tearing the skin and fracturing. And this gas now, which is like a whirlwind, just picks up the tissue and bone and blood and everything, and it ejects it out the mouth and ejects it out the nose. And that's what backsplatter is. And so it's different in areas. You shoot someone in the chest, you don't expect to get much backsplatter because the gas is going to go in contact wounds. Or the abdomen. And the side of the head, yes, you're going to, through that 3-inch gap. And in the mouth, it's going to be even more, because the mouth is, 2 inches total diameter? And then the gas will come out your nose like jets. I mean, you think of it, it's almost like a launching ramp.
It's literally how I was envisioning it.
With intraoral wounds, out comes the material out the mouth, out comes the material out the nose. And the more powerful the cartridge, that is a 38 versus a 32, the more powerful the cartridge is loaded, plus P versus standard, the more pressure, the more gas coming out, and the more energy it imparts to the tissue, the more energy it imparts to the blood, the farther it will go out. Because more energy, more imparted to the portion of blood, the farther it goes.
Dr. DeMaio, you've explained that
Wow.
energy, the amount of energy that gets created makes a difference as to how far a particle goes. Would that include a blood spatter?
That was crazy.
They was talking about, if you go, that a particle of blood or a drop of blood can only go a certain distance. What determines the distance it goes is two things. its size, and its velocity. Now, a big particle tends to go further because it's not affected by the air resistance as much. But a small particle, which may go a certain distance, say 2 feet, if you give it more energy, it'll go 3 feet or 4 feet. It's kind of like taking 2 cars, the same model, the exact same weight, get one up to 60 miles per hour, get one up to 20 miles per hour, and turn off the ignition. Now, the cars are the same weight. Which is going to go farther, coasting, the 60 or the 20? The 60. Because even though the mass is the same, the weight is the same, the other one has more velocity and therefore more kinetic energy. And so the more gas, the more pressure, the more turbulence, the farther the blood particles are going to be propelled outward from the body in back spatter.
Dr. DeMeyer, I want to ask a follow-up question on that point. You heard some of Dr. Harold's testimony and some of the questions asked by Mr. Jackson that certain mist-like or very small blood spatter particles could go no more than 2 to 3, maybe possibly 4 feet. Is that true?
It's not true. Not say, let's forget about laboratory. Let's just go to a scene. If you go to a scene, depends on the weapon, depends on the velocity. You go into a room 12 by 12, and you see somebody who got shot with a .22, there's a few little particles. You put a 12-gauge shotgun, every wall has blood on it. And there's mist on the ceiling. Well, mist isn't supposed to go all the way up there. It does if it's given sufficient velocity. It's all a matter of how much velocity that you give to the blood particles. And it also depends on how you define mist particles. I mean, what's the size of mist? The German research divides particles into 2 sizes. Macro, which is bigger than 0.5 millimeters, and micro, which is less than 0.5. And what was described here on the jacket was 1 millimeter, which is bigger than the minimum for macro. You know, 1 is macro. 0.9 is macro, 0.8, 0.7, 0.6, 0.5 is macro. Then 0.4 becomes micro. But even then, that's to a degree arbitrary. But it's depending on how much kinetic energy you're getting.
So let's just say a 0.5 millimeter spot of blood can go more than 4 feet?
Sure it can. It depends on the amount of kinetic energy that's imparted to it.
You've seen that in your work?
Yes, you can see small particles on that. But if you want to really get a better understanding, is you want to go to experimentation. And the thing with blood spatter is there has only been one valid group of experimentation, and this was in Germany by Dr. Karga. Everything else is shooting sponges. Now, you all have kitchen sponges. You're not built like kitchen sponges. You have blood vessels. The sponge absorbs everything. So experiments done with sponges are really nice to give an effect, but not if you want to know what the actual results are in a living person. The only way you're going to get valid results is by shooting something that is alive, that has blood vessels, that has blood pressure. And what was done by Dr. Karga was he shot calves that were going to slaughter. They were going to be killed anyway. And so he shot them.
Well, now the jury is like,
actually, he got a veterinarian to shoot them. And he actually had a high-speed camera photographing everything. And then he laid out paper to see. And what he found was that the blood came out in a semicircle He shot them in the temple. The blood came out in a semicircle, going out in different directions. And it's not concentric, by the way. I mean, you can't look at the pattern and say, well, the person was turned to the right because I see more blood there. The blood goes out at random. A lot of blood can go to the right, or a lot to the left, or a lot to the middle, or it can go even. There's no rule. There's too many variable factors. And so the blood can come out, he found out. Now, when he did his studies, he found particles 0.5 and above could go out to essentially 4 feet, okay? These 0.5 particles are smaller than a number of the particles seen on the white jacket, okay?
You're referring to Mr. Spector's jacket.
Right, Mr. Spector's. So that's 4 feet. But then he said something else. He says, yeah, we got him out to 4 feet, but that's shooting calves. He says, there's a difference. And he said, here's the difference. He said, the anatomy of the calf head is a little different in that, remember I said in the head you have skin and then you have bone? In the calf you have skin and then you got a lot of muscle and a lot of fat and then you have bone. And so what he said was, if you had gas going in, the gas would be dispersed in that fat or muscle. And so a lot of it, so that would lower the pressure. And so when you got your back splatter, it was not as bad. And if you shoot someone in the head with a .38, 9 times out of 10 you're going to get a tear. You did. All you got in his cases were neat, round, 9mm holes. And he said, that's, and what he's saying in a way is, that's not the way it really is, And in people, so in calves it'll go out to 4 feet. And in people, it will go further. And in his article, when he does say it will go further, what he does is he mentions some articles. He mentions his own experience where it went out to 6 feet, the blood spatter. And he quotes another German article where it went out to, I think, something like 7.5 feet or something like that. Okay. And so he says, yeah, 4 feet is for calves. For people, it's going to be further. And the experience is, when you start looking at different calibers, different areas, different wounds, it goes out farther than 1 foot or 2 feet. And, high velocity or mist-like things, which is to a certain degree arbitrary. What is mist? Is a 0.4 mist, but a 0.5 not? Do you really think there's much difference between a 0.5 and a 0.4?
Dr. DeMaio, when you talk about experience, you're talking about what actually happens at death scenes?
Yes. No, the experiments at the calves. What I'm talking about is at the death scenes. Yes, you go to them, and they're a little different than shooting sponges.
Okay. Dr. DeMaio, with reference to your experience, do you publish?
Imagine the jury is looking at it like
do you
that.
talk about this back spatter issue?
I believe I mention it, but I was interested mostly on back splatter onto the hands, rather than distances, because most of the distance thing, that's done by criminalists and such. I'm interested in the back spatter on the body, and that's where I concentrated my discussion on the book.
Let's follow up on that. Why is back spatter on the body something that you're interested in?
Because, again, it gives you an individual, it gives you an idea where the individual's, say, hands were or what position they were in at the time. So, in theory, when you shoot yourself, you should have back spatter on the hands. And it depends, and you will find if you look for gross back spatter, just look at it with your naked eye, you only find it about 40 or 50% of the time. That's because if you really want to look for back spatter, what you're supposed to do is get a lens and examine it. And actually, one of the most productive areas for back spatter is not only the hands, but you'll tend to look in the cuffs, okay? And the thing with the background, we're looking for it on the hands, the head, or shoot themselves in the mouth and such, which is not that uncommon. The most common place people shoot themselves with a handgun is the temple. That's about 50% of the time, right temple. And then about 14% of them shoot themselves in the mouth. And there's a lot of
Thank you, Pokemon.
statistics on that, on who likes to shoot themselves. Like women prefer handguns. If a woman's
Your Honor, this is not responsive to the question at this point.
I'm going to allow it. It just whether we do it with a follow-up question.
I want to allow it too. This is incredibly interesting.
Women like handguns more than men when they shoot themselves.
You're right. We do need a
prefer,
fajita emoji. I'm going to put that in my notes.
They prefer to do that. Actually, the most common method of suicide among women in the United States is gunshot wound. People all think it's drugs, but it's not. It's gunshots, wounds is number one. Second most common are drugs. And when they do shoot themselves, about 87, based on the largest study in the United States, 87% of the women shoot themselves with a handgun, only 76% of men. So women like handguns. Now, some people say, well, women don't shoot themselves in the head. Well, that's not true. It's a little less than men. Men shoot themselves in the head 85% of the time. Women, 76% of the time. So at least 3/4 of the time when a woman shoots herself, she's going to shoot herself in the head. And that time, 14% will be in the mouth, because the 14% is the same for men or women.
Dr. DeMaio, I want to, we've only got a few minutes before we are going to be done for the noon hour, but I wanted to
And Murder Church. Thanks everyone for hanging out over.
Going through all the materials now. We'll get to that when we resume. But you looked at a number of materials in this case and ultimately came to a conclusion as to the manner of death of Lana Clarkson. Is that true?
Yes.
And what was your conclusion after doing your evaluation in this particular case?
That she died of a self-inflicted wound. There's no objective scientific evidence that anyone else held the gun. Everything else is speculative. The physical evidence is consistent with her having the gun and her having discharged the gun.
Let's talk about that physical evidence that you mentioned. Would one of those items of physical evidence be this spatter on her hands?
Yes, she had blood spatter on her hands. And, she didn't have very much, but some people have none. Blood spatter on the hands is kind of like, if it's there, it's there. Whether it's 1 or 1,000, it's kind of like a positive pregnancy test. You're either pregnant or you're not. There's blood spatter on the hands. There's no question about that. It's described at the scene by the medical examiner's investigator. And you can see it on the photograph. So she's got blood spatter on her hand. Not much, but some people don't have any. But she's got it. And she's got gunshot residue on the hand. Again, you're talking about objective, that she's got numerous particles of gunshot residue. Now, in this case, they did not differentiate from the front or the back. They just took one hand and I took one stickum and did the front and back, and one front and back of the other hand. So you can't get a distribution. And I don't think they even ran the complete pickup thing, whatever. The word escapes me. You know what I'm talking about. You can run the whole thing. Years ago, you had to do it manually. You don't have to do it now. The new machines, you run it at night. You line it up, put the thing in the machine, and go home at 5 o'clock. And in the morning, you get the result. And then you can double check to make sure the positives are really positives. But she's got the blood on the hands. She's got gunshot residue particles on the hands. She's got an intraoral gunshot wound. They're 99% suicide. I mean,
Particles on
my
the
whole
hands.
career, I've been doing this 38 years. I've seen 3 homicides from intraoral. So they're 99%. And there's the blood, and there's a gunshot residue. It's just, that's the objective evidence. I mean, you know, you're not speculating about what people said or what people did or what people felt. You know the gunshot residue is on the hand. You know the blood's on the hand. You know it's an intraoral. Yeah, you know, well, was she suicidal? Did she write something suicidal? Well, there's no suicide note. 75% of the people don't write notes. Well, people don't commit suicide in public. Yes, they do. You see the newsman, the politician who put the gun in his mouth and killed himself on TV? And, well, there was no planning. A suicide is many times impulsive. The person who's sitting in a car arguing with the husband, she finally says, "I've had it," and opens the door and steps out of the car doing 70 miles per hour. The man arguing with his wife who says, "I can't take it anymore," picks up a gun or a knife and kills himself. These aren't planned things. And then you add alcohol. At the time of the death, the alcohol level was 0.12. Once you reach 0.1, the alcohol has been shown to disturb your thinking process. You've seen drunk people do stupid things. Well, they start doing stupid things at 0.1, and she had 0.12. And what a sober person does, someone who's intoxicated, and 0.12 is intoxicated, will do. And if you add Vicodin, which is also at the present, there's a synergistic action. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 5 when you get 2 central nervous system depressants and doing that. And alcohol makes you do stupid things. I'm sure there are some people in this courtroom who did stupid things when they had too much alcohol. And so you look at the objective, the thing that you can quantitate, the thing that you can look at that's written down. It says suicide. Everything else is, oh, well,
thank you, Karen
could this
B.
have been this way and could have been that way.
You make the church world go round,
Anything,
baby.
you know, anything can be anything. But when you stick to the
Amazing morning.
objective scientific evidence, it's a suicide.
Doctor, on that note, we're going to take a recess. This would be a good time, Your Honor?
Yes, we will provide the community time after the jury leaves. We have a couple motions we have to discuss. Ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind the admonition. You're excused until 9:30 tomorrow morning, and the witness is ordered to return at that time. Thank you.
Wow. So I'm going to give you my opinion on what I think happened there. I want to see where we're going next. The judge and counsel discuss exhibits outside the presence of the jury. All right, we'll start that up probably Tuesday night. Wow, though. Holy shit. I don't want to forget his name here. Yeah, Dr. Vincent DeMaio. So Dr. Vincent DeMaio thinks that she killed herself. So we have the history, and I'm just going to kind of go over what we have here. We have the history of what Phil has done to many women that's testified. All right. I'm going to give another possible theory here, which is holding them captive and guns end up in their mouths because he doesn't want them to leave. Seems like what's happened here with Lana Clarkson, right? This guy's, testimony, even ending it there with how anything can happen in the heat of the moment. You put alcohol into play, and then you put in some of the past stuff that we've heard about Lana wanting to, end it, wanting to leave this earth because of the headaches that she had and that she was plagued with that they were going into. And then here's what I'm thinking, and I'm just kind of opining here and out loud. I don't fully think this, but a possibility of it's the normal's happening. She's ready to leave. She's like, I'm getting the hell out of here. Phil does his normal. Oh, you're not going anywhere. As he brings the gun out, You know, he is having a bit of a moment, right? And if the gun's out, she's probably, you know, normally instantly, oh fuck, no, I'm not going anywhere. It's anything you want, Phil. You have Lana Clarkson here, who's already kind of at the end of her wits, right? She's already like, fuck it. Like, you know, right? Let's fucking dance here. Gets a little bit more chaotic. Takes the gun from Phil, maybe, huh? I'm just bullshitting here, guys. Also, feel free to do the same in the chat. And says, fuck it. And then does the deed. And Phil's left there like, holy fucking shit. What the hell just happened? Also probably wasted out of his mind. Goes out in a complete fucking blur to his limo guy who, you know, I don't know. That's a wild one, dude. But, you know, here's what I think about the doctor's opinions. Here's where I think that he's a little bit full of shit. So I love that he went through all of these, you know, instances, and he really broke down loads of stuff that made me understand a little bit more, you know, about blood splatter and you know, residue and what happens in the instance of killing or somebody doing something or pulling the trigger or using a gun. But when he was directly asked, okay, think about how he was answering those questions and just generally talking, because this is literally his everyday. He probably talks to students. He probably teaches classes. He's done admittedly done countless trials. He's just flowing. He's out there going, right? And we're all sucked in because he's a really descriptive, great storyteller, killing it. But when the defense attorney asked him, when he said, do you think that Lana Clarkson did this to himself? Now go back and watch it. I'm actually going to try to maybe pull out some clips here. I feel like his demeanor changed a little bit, and he wasn't as straightforward. He answered the way you would expect him to answer, right? Again, this was a witness brought on by the defense, however you want to look at that. And I like the guy. I think he's extremely interesting. Like, I was in. But go back and watch the way he answered as soon as they asked specifically about Lana. And I think it's a little different. I think his demeanor changes. I think his tone changes. He's not really even kind of making eye contact with the jury at that time. And there at the very end, when he kind of went back into what he was already talking about, you know, what he knows, the science, he went right back into being extremely confident, knowing everything. I don't know. That was extremely interesting. And yeah, I can't wait to see Cross either. Holy shit. So yeah, we're starting up Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time, forensic pathologist. Oh wait, hold on. I went back to get his name. Next we got something else. 18 minutes of the judge and counsel discuss exhibits outside the presence of the jury. And then hopefully we'll pick right back up, because that was extremely freaking interesting. Holy crap. We got a wheel to spin. That was awesome though. That was fucking awesome. I love getting us in here now. Hold on. I'm gonna have to turn my green screen off also and make sure the chat's rocking. Get everyone hanging out here. Appreciate the fuck out of it. All right, let me get my green screen off. Let me get this up here. Good luck, everyone that's donated. Amazing morning here in the church. Yeah, and you got to come back for the cliffhanger here. We got to see what Cross. Hopefully it's Alan Jackson. Hopefully he jumps up there and see what we get. All right. Let's go. Good luck, everybody. Oh, shit. Oh, it's chaos. Who is that? I can't even read it. Carolyn. Is that Carolyn? It's Carolyn. I have to go back and look at my list. Hold on. I can't even read my thing. Hold on. No Willgate here tonight. It is Carolyn A. Yeah, okay. Yeah, Carolyn, congratulations. I don't remember if that was on, because this, yeah, no, that was today. Yeah, fuck yeah. Shit, yeah. Hold on. So let me get this back up here. Don't like to be naked in front of everybody. I don't like to be naked. I don't like to be naked. Yeah, right here. Carolyn, who membered up. Congratulations. Bada bing, bada boom. Get the love there in the chat. Get at me. I don't know if she's still in here. But yeah, get at me, publiclybuzzed at gmail.com. Or if you're on X, message me. But either way, the next time anybody sees her in the chat, let her know she just won a freaking shirt. She just won a shirt. Any shirt from the shop, publiclybuzzed.com. Congratulations. We're out here, baby. We're out here. We're not messing around.
Brooklyn!
I don't know that.
I'm sober enough to know what I'm doing, and I'm drunk enough to really enjoy doing it.
All right, guys. Yeah, everyone, thank y'all so much. Love everybody. And yeah, Carolyn, membering up, getting a shirt. Anybody that's not membered up, you're going to want to be, because a bunch of cool stuff's coming. And again, maybe tomorrow night, there could be, again, the new trial's coming. I'm going to do a teaser one more time, doing the Courtney Clinty trial. And I need to get a show together. It might be coming tomorrow. Keep eyes on everything. Boom. We're doing it. Doing big things around these parts, everybody. All right, everyone, have a great rest of Sunday. Wherever where you're at in the world. We have people all over the world. If you're in Australia, that means you're freaking 14 hours into the future. So that's dope as hell. But okay, have a great day. I'm rambling. Keep eyes on all socials. Love you guys. Buzz Nation out. Boom.
Dispersion!